On the top of the tower above the city gate was Lu Lan, and behind him were 4 officers, Lin Feng and Lu Fei. On the top of the tower above the city gate was Lu Lan, and behind him were 4 officers, Lin Feng and Lu Fei. Lu Lan had been standing there for a few hours already. He remained motionless while the others remained silent. They all understood the pain Lu Lan was feeling in his heart. Over 100,000 people, their lives, their families, their future had vanished in an instant. This was the truth of war. It was the sad truth. Nobody could predict what was going to happen. Such dramatic events hadn't taken place in over 10 years. Besides, Lu Lan had never lost any of his battles in the past, but at that moment, he had lost and his army was massacred. Lu Lan took a deep breath. He then slowly turned around. At that moment, everybody inside the city was already packing and ready to leave Duanren City. The MOU country was putting pressure on them by using the princess life. They wouldn't be able to defend the Duanren border. If they lost the Duanren border, Duanren City would become a very dangerous place. A 500,000-strong army would easily be able to conquer Duanren City. They were not a simple military force, a large number had broken through to the Ling Qi layer. In one jump, they could scale the gate of Duanren City. From there they could rain down arrows and annihilate everything inside. Even though Duanren City is vast, it could only be considered a small town. It has a population of 550,000 civilians. The civilians must leave the city, even though for many of them it is their place of birth. As a general, I cannot get them involved, said Lu Lan while sighing. As in any war, the outcome is never certain, you can win or you can lose. The only thing in your control is how you deal with the situation, General, said Lin Feng while shaking his head. What do you expect me to do? I don't understand, asked Lu Lan, who didn't understand. Lin Feng turned around, looked at Lu Zhang. He then said in a calm and solemn tone, I need wood. Wood? Lu Lan stared blankly at Lin Feng. He was dumbfounded. Lin Feng spoke again, Uncle Lu, I hope that you can satisfy my request this time. After remaining silent for a moment, Lu Zhang nodded in a serious way and said, all right. Officers, I hope you can help me as well, said Lin Feng while looking at Zhou Qixia and the others. They all slightly nodded, even though they didn't know what Lin Feng actually really meant to do. At that moment, in the city, horses were neighing and many people were getting ready to leave. Amongst these people, many of them were from the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu and the Celestial Academy. They all looked deathly pale. They had hoped to gain military exploits, but it was impossible for them. That place was too dangerous. They had to go back to the Imperial City, where it was safe. This battle had nothing to do with them. Even the young men who had come with Duan Tianlang were leaving as well. Lu Lan, shouted Duan Tianlang extremely loudly. Lu Lan, you caused our own army fight against each other and the princess was captured because of it. You then caused hundreds of thousands of people to lose their homes. I will report all of this to His Majesty and he will decide himself on how to punish you for your crimes, shouted Duan Tianlang as he moved into the distance. He made it sound like Lu Lan was guilty for everything and never took any of the responsibility. Lin Feng's heart grew extremely cold. The princess had been kidnapped at Duan Tianlang's encampment, but he was making out that it had nothing to do with him. Besides, he was running back to the Imperial City. The princess' life suddenly meant nothing to him any longer. Lin Feng also understood that Duan Tianlang wanted to go to the Imperial City to remove all responsibility from himself and shift the blame onto Lu Lan. Lu Lan didn't pay attention to Duan Tianlang. He was worthless. What Lu Lan was regretting the most was that he let Duan Tianlang join them in the first place. He should have known better than to think Duan Tianlang would be of any actual use on the battlefield. With the smile of victory on his face, Duan Tianlang, the chief commander, was escaping from Duanren City with his army. Lu Tsanglan would inevitably stay there and fight Mou, resulting in his death. This battle would be even worse for them, no one would be able to escape uninjured. When the right moment came, Duan Tianlang would report Lu Tsanglan's crimes to His Majesty. The third day, the deadline was slowly arriving. Rumbling noises filled the atmosphere. Mou soldiers on their horses were arriving outside of Duanren border. Their army stretched across the landscape as far as the eye could see. But at that moment, on the hills of Duanren border, there was nobody at all. Mo Jia moved towards the front line on his horse. He looked at the empty mountains and looked like he was lost in thought. Could it be that the troops of Shuiyu had really withdrawn and were offering the Duanren border to the Mu country? Bring the princess to the front, said Mo Jia indifferently. Duan Xinyi was on a horseback and was wearing armor. Besides, she wasn't chained or restrained in any way. Just like Mo Jia said, they hadn't harmed the princess at all. First row of black guards, go secure the cliffs of the Duanren border and do a thorough inspection, said Mo Jia. In a flash, a row of black guards galloped towards the top of Duanren border. If Mo Jia gave them an order, they obeyed it even if it cost them their life. This group of black guards were extremely skillful. If there was nobody to guard Duanren border, it was easy for them to reach the top. At the top, they could check if there was an ambush lying in wait for them. 1 hour later, the entire row of black guards came back. Nobody was missing. Your Highness, there is nobody to be seen from the top of the Duanren border. There is nobody in Duanren city either, not even soldiers, said one of them. Mo Jia was surprised. Not only was there nobody in the Duanren border but there was nobody in Duanren city either. Clear the way first, said Mo Jia while sounding cold and detached. Maybe that Duanren city was already completely abandoned. If there wasn't the Duanren border, he would have already engaged in battle and definitely would have won. The soldiers were walking forwards and then disappeared beyond the Duanren border. Mo Jia and his troops were prudently moving forwards. If he fought against Lu Tsanglan, he would definitely win, but it wouldn't be that easy. During a war, a strategy had to be flawless. If it wasn't, one could suffer a crushing defeat. As Mo Jia thought, Duanren city was absolutely empty. It was a calm, silent and unpopulated city. Mo Jia was standing at the top of the protection tower within Duanren city and looked expressionless. He had been coming to Duanren border for many years and always wanted to pass through, but at that moment, he had passed through. He could see the sea of broken weapons. It was the symbol of victory, but that victory was. Station the troops inside Duanren city and occupy it, said Mo Jia. Immediately after, the order was passed to the troops. They had already conquered the Duanren border. They were also capturing Duanren city. Over the vast landscape one could see the Mou troops sweeping across the flatlands. At midnight, except for a few night guards, everybody was getting a well-deserved rest. Outside of Duanren city, a few sorrowful-looking silhouettes appeared. In their eyes was pure killing intent. At the same time, a great number of armored horses were silently moving towards Duanren city, however they abruptly stopped. They didn't take one more step forwards. At that moment, Lin Feng was also outside of Duanren city. His black eyes looked ice-cold. He could clearly see everything that was happening inside Duanren city. Lin Feng jumped into Duanren city. He was well prepared. A single guard was there. Lin Feng quickly covered their mouth to prevent them from shouting and without mercy he slit their throat. Lin Feng took the armor from the corpse and put it on. He then immediately threw the corpse from the city wall and the people below caught it, therefore there was still absolute silence. Lin Feng could clearly perceive everything that was happening around him. He started to move with complete silence. A moment later, a few more corpses were thrown from the city wall. The Shuiyu troops who were catching the corpses, then took the armor from the corpses and wore it. They then jumped onto the city wall to replace the guards. They were all extremely skillful and careful to make no noise. All of them had been selected as the best amongst Qixia troops. They were all the best of the best from the most elite units within the army. They were all at least sergeants, and the weakest of them had reached the third Ling Qi layer. They were not only doing this at one location on the city walls. Many of them were all attacking from a large number of places and taking over the city wall. The strongest of them were moving into Duanren city, killing the night guards and throwing the corpses over the wall to provide the others with armor. It was already late into the night, so everything was done under the cover of darkness and with complete silence. Nobody had been alarmed by these actions. At that moment, a group of black guards armed with spears appeared in Duanren city. They looked majestic and imposing. Amongst them was a young man whose face looked incredibly delicate. It was Lin Feng. These people didn't belong to Mou country at all. They were all from Shuiyu. Because the Mou troops had come in and immediately set up camp, they weren't very strict with fortifying their position. Therefore, Lin Feng could easily move to every corner of the city. A short moment after, Lin Feng and the others arrived at a room and immediately entered. "Stop!" someone suddenly cried. Two guards were preventing Lin Feng and the others from going inside. They then said, "Some people are already staying inside." "I know," said Lin Feng while continuing to walk forwards. These two guards were astonished. Immediately after, a resplendent and bright glow appeared and a light green dagger cut the throats of the two guards. They then softly fell down onto the floor. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered and he immediately moved towards the room. The door of the room opened itself, emitting a squeaking sound. The light green dagger started to glow again and quickly slit the throat of the man who just opened the door. His mouth was covered as he slumped down as to stop him making any sounds. "There is another person inside," said Lin Feng. Immediately after, they entered the room. Inside the room, there was a great deal of wood. This was part of their plan. The Shuiyu troops were very familiar with it. They knew exactly where everything was placed. The same thing was happening at multiple locations within Duanren city. Finally a sound filled the atmosphere, breaking the silence and calling the troops to attention. When Lin Feng heard the sound, he obviously knew that they were out of time. He quickly entered into another room and as he left, flames appeared behind him. There were flames everywhere, fire was completely covering Duanren city. Lin Feng seemed pensive while looking at the flames. In his previous life, he used to use fire to cook delicacies. In this life, he was using fire to cook people alive. Of course, he knew that this amount of fire wouldn't be sufficient. He needed to turn it into a rampaging fire which engulfed the entire city. All around the outside of Duanren city, the Qixia troops were watching the flames as they engulfed the city. After the order was given, they all urged their horses on and galloped towards Duanren city at full speed. All around the outside of Duanren city, the Qixia troops were watching the flames as they engulfed the city. After the order was given, they all urged their horses on and galloped towards Duanren city at full speed. In the blink of an eye, the Qixia troops arrived in front of Duanren city with their bows in hand. The flames were already soaring higher and higher. Amongst the Qixia troops, all of them had prepared for this moment beforehand. The heads of their arrows were already alight with raging fire and immediately after that, they released their arrows from their bows and a fiery rain of arrows fell upon the city. What seemed like an endless rain of burning arrows continued to rain down on the city. The scene was magnificent and tragic. Immediately after, the Mou troops looked at the rain of burning arrows filling the sky above them. They were astonished. It seemed like the heavens were punishing them. After the Qixia troops shot the first volley of arrows, they then started to circle the city releasing volley after volley of fiery death. The scene was so bright that it seemed like the sun had risen early. Shortly after, the entire city of Duanren was a sea of flames. At that moment, chaos and disorder struck the Mou troops. That sudden attack had surprised them. They had fallen into a fire trap. At the same time, inside the city, Lin Feng and the elite soldiers were assassinating the higher-ranking commanders who could relay orders to stop the chaos. If they had been prepared and ready to fight, it would have been difficult. However, using these burning arrows, it was possible to injure or kill cultivators of the third Ling Qi layer and even the elites of higher cultivation levels. Of course, it was very difficult to injure the stronger cultivators, but it was enough to injure and kill the troops around them. That had been enough to create chaos amongst the MOU troops. That blazing fire made the MOU troops unable to return to formation and organize their army. It was even more chaotic amongst their horses. At that moment, Mo Jia was inside his room getting dressed. A burning arrow shot past him. He was calm yet looked pensive. Burning the entire city with flaming arrows, Lu Zhanglan really deserves his nickname, the Divine Arrow, said Mo Jia while sounding indifferent. Immediately after, he said, I order all the troops to move back towards the northern gate. Don't extinguish the fire and don't chase those who have entered the city. Just move back to the northern gate and get prepared to welcome them. When Mo Jia finished talking, his order was relayed to all their troops throughout the burning city. At that moment, all the MOU troops had stopped trying to extinguish the fire and stopped fighting against the infiltrators. They were all moving towards the northern gate of the city. Inside the city, a soldier was killed in the blink of an eye. At the same time, Mo Jia's order had been relayed to all of the troops, so they no longer looked for Lin Feng or tried to stop him. Lin Feng could also now ignore them and started to move towards the north gate. The soldiers who had been chasing Lin Feng were not the only ones to obey the order and stop fighting. All the army without exception followed orders. Nobody dared to call the order into question. They hadn't felt the slightest bit of hesitation. Mo Jia has such a strong influence on his troops, thought Lin Feng when he saw that scene. The MOU country had the goal to make Mo Jia their national symbol, to make them worship him as a god amongst men. Mo Jia obviously enjoyed such a prestigious reputation in MOU. There was no one who doubted his strength and talent. Staying in such a chaotic situation and being unable to act rationally could have led to heavy losses for their army. Gathering the troops together in one place was the best reaction to counter the enemy's strategy. It would enable them to concentrate their strength and break free from the encirclement. Now, all we have to do is rely on Uncle Lu, thought Lin Feng. Immediately after, he sheathed his sword and ran like mad through the flames. He was running shoulder to shoulder with the other troops towards the northern gate. At that moment, even though the MOU troops were trying to gather all together, chaos was still present amongst them. Lin Feng was wearing a MOU armor, so there was no chance that anybody would find out who he was unless he attacked them. Besides, it was impossible for hundreds of thousands of troops to know every single face within the army. At the northern gate, there was an unceasing rain of arrows falling from the sky. The strong cultivators of the MOU country had gathered there. Some of them could control ice, snow, and water. Therefore, they could easily extinguish the fire. In the entire city of Duanren, the northern gate was the safest place, but it was also covered in darkness. But in a short time, about 100,000 troops had already gathered there, and the number of people seemed to be increasing over time. The crowd was extremely silent. They could distinctly hear the chaos in the distance as well as the people's steps near them. At that moment, Mo Jia was standing in front of the crowd looking towards the city gate and said while sounding indifferent, "Open the gate." "Open the gate," shouted a high-ranking soldier. While the gate was being opened, a rumbling noises spread through the air. 5,000 elite cavalry, open the way and secure the path 2 kilometers ahead, said Mo Jia. Some armored cavalry gathered, they urged on their horses and moved towards the exit of the city. In the middle of the night, they couldn't see a great deal, so they also couldn't see if they were running into an ambush. However, even in the case of an ambush, it was impossible for the entire army to get killed. In the middle of the crowd, Lin Feng looked at the soldiers who were remaining calm. Mo Jia was truly terrifying. Even at that moment, nobody was calling his orders in question. He was a true leader. Even at a moment when the sky seemed to be raining death down onto them, they remained calm and fearless. If the leader didn't remain calm, could his army remain calm? With such a huge number of people, it was hard to restore calmness to the army. The northern city gate was far from the Duanren border. Mo Jia was trying to think as if he was Lu Lan, and if he had been Lu Lan, he would have set an ambush between Duanren city and the Duanren border, but that was the western city gate. That's why Mo Jia had chosen the northern gate and not the western gate. He did not want to fall into a trap and get killed. The 5,000 cavalry were progressing through the dark. Everything was perfectly calm and tranquil. The only sound was that of their horse hoofs hitting the ground. At that moment, a few horses neighed loudly. Suddenly there was the feeling that the ground was unsteady beneath their feet. The cavalry and their horses fell down in a deep pit. When the cavalry behind them heard this, they rushed over thinking it was an enemy attack and fell into the pit. The situation was chaotic. Those who had just fallen into the pit wanted to move, but then they were stopped by the falling soldiers and horses which fell onto them. The situation was chaotic. Arrows started to fill the air, emitting whistling sounds as they pierced through the darkness. Horrible shrieks unceasingly came from the direction in the elite cavalry unit had entered the darkness to clear the way. The faces of the troops still inside the city turned deathly pale when they heard the horrible shrieks. Their comrades had probably died in an ambush. "Let's move, let's go to the western gate," said Mo Jia while remaining calm. Immediately after, all his troops moved towards the western gate. Even though those who had an ice spirit were opening the way, they were still suffering losses as people died as they were burnt to death or struck by the rain of fiery arrows falling from the sky. However, the number of troops gathered at the western gate hadn't decreased. On the contrary, there were even more than at the northern gate because there were still parts of the army joining the main force which had not yet arrived. At that moment, there were more than 200,000 soldiers that gathered at the western city gate. But Mo Jia felt cold in his heart. Setting the city on fire was an extremely cruel method. Mo Jia couldn't help but appreciate the strategy. That tactic was unprecedented in history of the continent, and it proved to be extremely efficient. It seemed like his 500,000 strong army were prisoners inside the city they had just captured. "Open the gate, 3,000 elite cavalry, go and clear a path to the Duanren border," said Mo Jia while still remaining indifferent. This time, he didn't send 5,000 but 3,000 troops. As before, these troops opened the gate and left without hesitation. However, they ran straight into an ambush and Lu Lan could be seen with his troops on the horizon. The MOU troops understood that Mo Jia had seen that there was a high possibility of it being a trap. Going to the western city gate was actually falling deeper into their trap. A moment before, outside of the northern gate there might not have been enough traps to stop the entire army, there may have only been a single trap. However, they had fallen right into the enemy's hands. "General Lu Lan, you are extremely smart. I am now thoroughly convinced," said Mo Jia while looking at Lu Lan in a cold and detached way. At that moment, the Shuiyu troops were still firing arrows. There was an endless rain of fire flying through the sky. Because the tower blocked their sight, the MOU troops couldn't see how many people were waiting outside. They could only see an endless stream of fire on the horizon. "I am not the one who organized this strategy," said Lu Lan coldly while slowly raising his hand. "General, if it was not you, who was it?" asked Mo Jia stupefied. "Lin Feng." Lu Lan then waved his hand down. At that moment, a huge volley of arrows turned into a storm that ravaged the 200,000 of MOU troops. Under that storm of burning arrows, a huge number of troops were killed without the chance to fight back. At the same time, the arrows set the corpses and the ground on fire, which created a sea of fire which spread and burned even more people alive. When Mo Jia saw that the Shuiyu troops were about to shoot another volley of arrows, he already knew that it was impossible for him to escape. "Die!" shouted Mo Jia. The MOU army turned into a fearless war machine and moved towards the city gate to fight the arrows head-on. At that moment, everybody was cursing a single name, Lin Feng. After that battle, Lin Feng would be famous within Shueyu as well as in Mou. Chaos. Chaos. The troops from both countries were engaged in a fearsome battle. The battlefield was covered with the corpses of soldiers. The Mou troops had rushed from the city to fight against the Shueyu troops. The Mou troops constituted a powerful army and their spears glowed through the dark night with fearsome killing. The broken weapons on the ground emitted quiet metallic clangs from their movements. On both sides of the city, the Qi Xia troops gathered into one location on the battlefield. They then fired another volley of arrows towards the Mou army. The fire was still raging and the heat from the fire was growing more intense with every passing moment. The Mou troops didn't know how to react. At the same time, amongst the Mou troops, a sword glowed with a radiant light and released a terrifying deadly qi. The sword slashed in a circle at full speed which created a terrifying pressure which killed hundreds of soldiers. It was Lin Feng. After that sword attack, the other Qi Xia elites who had infiltrated the enemy's army also started to mercilessly slaughter the unguarded troops around them. It created chaos throughout the enemy army. However, they continued to follow orders and did not attach a great importance to their own lives. Fighting at that moment was an army of 250,000 Mou troops while the Shueyu troops were composed of less than 100,000 troops. Mou, while suffering heavy losses within the city, still held the advantage in numbers. However, sooner or later, the other Shueyu troops would have a direct confrontation with the enemy army. They just had to wait until the Mou troops moved closer. In the time it would take for the Mou army to reach them, how many arrows could they fire? But they had already killed half of the Mou army and had caused chaos within the army. Considering the fact that they still had the Qi Xia troops ready to fight and Lin Feng's group of elites inside the enemy army causing chaos, it was safe to say that they had complete control over the situation. When fighting the enemies in a head-on battle, who would have the bravest soldiers? Which side would win? Lin Feng was moving through the army. Anyone who tried to block Lin Feng turned into another corpse on the ground. Lin Feng wasn't alone though, he was surrounded by the group of elites accompanying him. The battle between Mou and Shueyu was a battle of victory or death. Retreating wasn't an option. Lin Feng had no choice. He needed to go and save Princess Duan Xianyi. Duan Xianyi had been kidnapped while he was protecting her. If something happened to her, Lin Feng would not only suffer a death sentence but it was also mean punishment for Lu Canlan. Lin Feng had to rescue Duan Xianyi. To Lin Feng's left, a sword was also unceasingly glowing and every time it moved someone was killed, making its owner look like a reaper of death. His sword was moving much faster than that of Lin Feng's sword. Each of its blows were not only faster but also much more powerful. The deadly qi it was releasing was several times heavier than that released by Lin Feng. It was clear that the owner of this sword had been through countless bloodbaths. Lin Feng turned around and saw the young man cutting down his enemies and was shocked. Currently the young man's face was not like that of a beautiful girl. At that moment, he looked ice-cold and emotionless. He was wearing pure white robes, but he looked like a death god. It was obviously Wen Ao Shui. No wonder he was so respected and revered at the Celestial Academy. Wen Ao Shui's beautiful eyes were as sharp as the god of death's sword. On the horizon, a beautiful light started to fill the sky. Day was starting to break. Outside of Duanren City, the sea of broken weapons had also turned into a sea of blood and corpses. These corpses were still fresh and blood continued to pour from the bodies to create a sea of blood. Lin Feng rushed forwards and with a single deadly sword he killed a dozen soldiers in his path. However, Lin Feng wasn't excited at all. He looked at all the countless corpses covering the battlefield. His heart felt saddened. This was war and their lives didn't matter much on the battlefield, but to someone they mattered. A rumble spread through the atmosphere and was coming from a distant place on the horizon. It was a crash of lightning as if the heavens were descending with their wrath. The entire crowd couldn't help but shiver from head to toe. Everybody slowly raised their head and looked to the horizon. On the horizon where the sun had started to rise there was now a sea of black clouds. It seemed like a human shape had appeared within them, but it quickly disappeared. Darkness filled the battlefield once again as the sky was covered by these clouds. It looked like a completely black creature who looked down on humans with disdain from the sky. How terrifying, thought Lin Feng. When he saw the sea of black clouds appear in the sky, his heart started pounding. A group of barbarians dared to fight against my MOU. A silhouette appeared in the middle of the sea of black clouds. Immediately after, the palm of his hand thrust out and a black seal appeared on the ground. The seal was the shape of a castle. There was a thick black deadly chi within which pounded into the ground and crushed anything in its way. The ground was violently shaking. The hearts of the Shueyu army were all trembling with fear. That attack had just killed 1,000 Shueyu soldiers. One attack was enough to claim 1,000 lives. These Shueyu soldiers could barely see it coming before they had been crushed, without even the time to give a horrible shriek. A gigantic black crater appeared in the ground from the attack. All the corpses of the Shueyu troops had disappeared into that blackness. Besides, those who were near the attack, men and horses were sent hurtling away. The faces of Shueyu army turned deathly pale. What kind of cultivator was that? Facing such a strong cultivator, they had lost all their courage to fight. Everybody had stopped moving. The Shueyu army had come to a halt, the MOU army had stopped too. They had all raised their heads and were blankly staring at that black silhouette in the sky. A short moment after, the MOU troops gave a furious shout which made the ground shake. That was an extremely strong cultivator from MOU. Alone, he could annihilate an entire army. When Lin Feng heard that shout, his sword slightly trembled. There was no room for strategy, he couldn't bring about a radical change in this situation. In front of such a strong cultivator, who could influence the entire course of the war, there was nothing he could do. He raised his left hand. Lin Feng hated his own weakness, he was not strong enough to protect himself and was not strong enough to influence the continent. That black palm must have been genuine pure energy and the cultivator must be at the Xian Qi layer. That pure energy was extremely brutal. A cultivator of the Xian Qi layer could rely on pure qi and pure energy. Such a person could control the sky and eliminate his enemies with powerful attacks. He was clearly at the Xian Qi layer and Chu Zhanpeng would be like an ant to be crushed under this cultivator's shoes. Someone who could control the sky and attack from the heavens was at least at the peak of the Xian Qi layer. Rumors said that the strongest cultivators could fly in the sky and kill millions of people as they wished. Those rumors were all true. That was the world of cultivation. Strong cultivators could act as they pleased. Soldiers, emperors, rulers, as long as they were strong, they could destroy or save life as they saw fit. Lin Feng also wanted to reach that point with his cultivation. He also hoped that he would be able to fly amongst the clouds someday. He was making great efforts to make that dream come true and he was unceasingly battling to gain enlightenment. His heart was filled with incredible ambitions and aspirations, he would grow to be as powerful as an unmovable mountain. But to reach such a cultivation level, how much determination, experience and training was required? Nobody knew. For example, the strong cultivator who was looking down on them from the clouds, could easily destroy the army of Shueyu. Could it be that the Shueyu army was going to die? Lu Zhanglan, you've been resisting my army for a while now, I respect you. You are an outstanding person, therefore I will let you die with dignity, I will allow you to take your own life. The black silhouette in the sky was looking at Lu Zhanglan and sounded like a majestic deity. In front of him, even the highest-ranking generals meant nothing. Lu Zhanglan raised his head while looking calm and indifferent. He looked at that silhouette in the sky. He then looked at the Shueyu army. It looked like he was lamenting. During a war between two countries, the strongest cultivators are not allowed to get involved. That is one of the rules that all countries respect, but today you come and pressure my army. Have I tacitly consented? Lu Zhonglan's voice was filled with sorrow. You would respect the rule unless it really wanted to conquer Shuiyu. At that moment, no matter if it was Yu or Shuiyu, neither of them had the power to conquer the other. Therefore, that rule couldn't be broken. Of course, there was one exception: if one side accepted the behavior of the other side. I accept. When the Shuiyu troops heard Lu Zhonglan, they were all filled with great sadness. Lin Feng was extremely saddened. The princess had been kidnapped, and Duan Tianlang had caused chaos within the army. Lu Zhonglan, at that moment, had agreed to take his own life. This war had caused chaos. Nobody knew what would happen from that point. Everybody was looking towards the sky at the black silhouette. They only saw that a cold smile had appeared on that black silhouette. He then said coldly, "Anyway, I will give you the time of 10 breaths. If you don't end your own life, then I will personally kill you." How could a real man accept death? I would rather die in a battle. Too bad that I've gotten my troops involved, said Lu Zhonglan while raising his head and looking at that black silhouette in the sky. Dense battle energy started burning around his body. His body then flew into the air. He was determined to fight until the end. How could he humiliate himself with suicide? The entire Shuiyu army looked extremely saddened. This battle was unfair. Since you want to die, I will help you achieve your goal, said the black silhouette coldly. He gathered the pure energy around his body once again. It contained immense power. In a towering rage, I rest under the whistling sound of rain. Gazing into the distance, looking up to the heavens, I utter a long and loud cry. My chest feels painful. 30 soldiers now with the dust and earth, the moon and the clouds stretching as far as can see. Suddenly a song filled the entire battlefield with a harmonious melody. If Lu Zhonglan dies today, Prince Mo Jia will be buried here as well. That voice was so light and powerful that there was no doubt to the truth contained within those words. The black silhouette had a respectful expression on his face, and he then looked into the distance and said, "Who dares to say such insane things?" Han Mo, did you think that the cultivators of Shuiyu were gone? Asked a voice which was growing nearer and nearer to that location. That person was quickly approaching from a great distance away. A short instant later, another silhouette appeared in the sky. There was a floating cloud of pure qi underneath that man. He was sitting cross-legged on the cloud of pure qi. He was just calmly playing the zither in front of him. Yan Yuping Sheng, if I had known I would have brought a raincoat. When Han Mo saw the person, he was astonished. Why had he shown up on the battlefield? With magnificent ideals in my mind yet starvation filling my stomach, I eat their flesh. To settle my thirst, I drink their blood. The middle-aged man was singing and playing the zither. His fingers drifted above the strings and a white pure qi emerged. In a flash, an ear-piercing sound spread through the air, and suddenly, 1,000 soldiers from Mou died miserably under the power of his sound-based attack. While laughing and talking, he reduced the enemy to nothing, killing without spilling blood. Han Mo, if you kill my soldiers, I will kill your soldiers. In the same way, if you kill Lu Zhonglan, I kill Mo Jia, said the middle-aged man coldly while looking at Han Mo. Psh! The light emitted by Lin Feng's sword was dazzling. The black guard's hand moved. Immediately after, Lin Feng felt that a rapid river was rushing towards him. His sword was swaying in the midst of a raging storm of attacks. There was a noise like a wave crashing down on the atmosphere. When the energy they were releasing collided, Lin Feng was immediately blown backwards. He only saw that that black guard had immediately landed back on his horse. He then looked at Lin Feng with a cold glare, and then the 8 black guards urged their horses forward and left with the princess. How strong! These black guards are extremely strong. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Even though there were only 8 of the black guards, they were much stronger than all the people that Lin Feng had killed previously. Lin Feng rushed forward while brandishing his sword, and immediately after, a soldier fell down from his horse. Lin Feng immediately jumped on the horse and galloped towards these 8 black guards at full speed. Duan Xinyi had to be saved even if it cost him his life. The wind was piercing through Lin Feng's eardrums. He was urging like mad on his horse, galloping at full speed. The wind was piercing through Lin Feng's eardrums. He was urging like mad on his horse, galloping at full speed. 2 silhouettes brandished their spears. They wanted to block Lin Feng, but they only saw his sword glow for an instant. In a flash, these 2 silhouettes fell dead onto the ground. That move hadn't affected Lin Feng's speed at all. Lin Feng was still chasing the princess while being completely surrounded by a fierce battlefield with people dying all around him. Lin Feng was galloping at full speed. He was almost out of the Duanren border. These 9 silhouettes, without the slightest bit of hesitation, entered the passageway that led out of the Duanren border. Lin Feng followed them without hesitation. Even though the Duanren border was already under the control of Mou, Lin Feng was also wearing the armor of a Mou soldier, which made him look like he was one of them. Therefore, nobody was going to attack Lin Feng. Lin Feng, as well as the group following him, also passed through the passageway of the Duanren border smoothly. Passing through the passage didn't slow them down at all. Once they exited the passage, they could see corpses as far as their eyes could possibly see. These dead bodies lying on the ground were all of the Shuayu troops. What fast horses! Even though Lin Feng's horse was galloping at full speed, he couldn't catch up with the black guards at all. Even though they were guided by the horse which Duan Xinyi was riding, these 9 brown horses were much faster than the ordinary horses Mou soldiers used. However, Lin Feng didn't intend to give up, and he was just as determined as before. They continued to chase them for a few hours. Lin Feng didn't know how much distance he had already covered. Once in a while, he could see smoke in the distance. At that moment, Lin Feng had already crossed the border that Shuayu and Mou shared. At that moment, he was in the Mou country. At that moment, there was foam around the mouth of the horse which Lin Feng was riding, and it was covered with sweat. It looked exhausted. That horse had incredible strength and agility, but at that moment, it was already unable to continue. A horse that quick and agile was already exhausted. Lin Feng could already sense that he was near his enemies. The silhouettes he had been chasing were finally slowing down, and then they slowly stopped. Lin Feng then abruptly pulled on the reins to make his horse come to a halt. The horse neighed, and suddenly, the legs of Lin Feng's horse suddenly bent and it fell down. At the moment when Lin Feng was pulling on the reins, the horse was already too exhausted to continue. It no longer had the energy to continue. Lin Feng jumped down from the horse. He raised his head and saw that the people he was following were also slowly turning around. While remaining on their horses, they coldly looked towards Lin Feng. Behind these people, Duan Xinyi was staring at Lin Feng. Even though her hair was messy, her beautiful face wasn't covered, and her soft and delicate face revealed that she was touched by Lin Feng's actions. Her expression was bewitching. Let the princess go. Lin Feng grabbed the long sword from his back. He then slowly started walking forwards. He looked cold and expressionless. The tip of his sword was dragging across the ground, which was sliced open by the sword, leaving a trail behind it. The prince has given us the order to capture him alive, said one of the black guards indifferently. Lin Feng was stupefied, as the prince wanted him alive. The prince was obviously Mo Jie. Could it be that he had planned everything from the beginning and had sent these soldiers to escort the princess and run far away with her so that Lin Feng would follow them? It was too bad that we had to spare his life last time. All we could do was take the princess alive. The prince is too merciful, said one of the men. His face was visible though. Even though he wasn't very old, his face was already covered with a long beard. Besides, what surprised Lin Feng is that even though the 8 people accompanying Duan Xinyi were all black guards, their helmets were different than normal. Amongst them, 4 of them had a helmet which entirely covered their face except for their eyes. The 4 others were wearing helmets which didn't entirely cover their faces. The one who had just talked was one of those wearing a helmet which didn't cover his entire face. Hu Qiong, even though we cannot kill him, we can teach him a good lesson. We can still be incredibly cruel, said another person. Hu Qiong was surprised. An evil smile appeared on his face. His horse then started walking towards Lin Feng. Do you know what status the 4 of us have? Asked Hu Qiong coldly. The 4 idiots, replied Lin Feng with an indifferent tone. How could he know who Hu Qiong and the others were? Idiots? Hu Qiong smiled coldly. You will realize how foolish you have been to attack us. We are all Black Guard lieutenants. We were leading troops on the battlefield, but because of you and that trap you organized, the prince ordered us to leave and capture you alive. You should be proud of yourself. Lieutenants, Lin Feng was surprised. Because of him, they used the princess as bait and sent 4 lieutenants. Against all expectations, they were really interested in him. But who were the 4 with their faces covered? Even though the chi they released was not as strong as that of the lieutenants, it was also extremely strong. Your strategy to set the city on fire has led to the death of many of our fellow soldiers, and even though I cannot kill you, I want to beat you within an inch of your life. All I feel is hatred towards you, said Hu Qiong. He then grabbed his weapon, which was a gigantic axe. He looked ferocious and terrifying. His axe probably weighed at least a few hundred kilos. Arf! Hu Qiong shouted furiously. His horse suddenly charged towards Lin Feng at full speed. His axe let out a loud thunderous roar as it tore through the air. Lin Feng unsheathed his sword with incredible speed and sliced off the front legs from the horse which Hu Qiong was riding. Hu Qiong continued and jumped from his horse towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng then raised his sword to block the axe as it crashed down from above. When the axe and Lin Feng's long sword met, Lin Feng was pushed down. The shock alone was enough to make Lin Feng groan, as he had been injured. How powerful, thought Lin Feng. He was astonished. He was blankly staring at the enemy. That guy was the same strength as the leader of the Black Guards he killed before, 7th Ling Chi layer. He was a level stronger than Lin Feng. Besides, the pressure of Hu Qiong's battle axe striking Lin Feng felt like a mountain crashing down on him, and it even split the ground beneath him. You cannot even withstand a single attack, laughed Hu Qiong while looking down on Lin Feng. However, when he raised his axe again, he was astonished. Lin Feng suddenly transformed into a shadow and disappeared from sight. Lin Feng had acted so quickly that Hu Qiong didn't even have time to react. He was still clumsily raising his huge axe. Be careful, shouted one of the Black Guards, but it was too late. Lin Feng's sword was already at Hu Qiong's throat. Hu Qiong was still trying to raise his axe, but Lin Feng had already withdrawn his sword. Vanishing shadow was the art of taking people's lives by sudden surprise attacks before they could react. One strike was enough. That was the power of a D-level skill. Even when Lin Feng was still at the 4th Ling Chi layer, he had used the same attack to kill a cultivator at the 7th Ling Chi layer. Lin Feng already possessed the strength of the 6th Ling Chi layer. Not only was his basic strength improved by a great deal, but he had also trained with using his martial skills. Practicing his martial skills allowed him to utilize maximum strength when attacking. He could use his vanishing shadow to slaughter people in an instant. Of course, Lin Feng had managed to kill Hu Qiong, who was at the 7th Ling Chi layer, because he underestimated Lin Feng. He had thought that he was a true expert, and Lin Feng exploited that opportunity. I don't want to die. Hu Qiong's throat let out a small cry, his voice husky. And suddenly, blood poured from his throat, and even if he didn't want to die, he was already dead. Life and death, a momentary slip and it could all be over. Hu Qiong, shouted the three other lieutenants at the same time. The three other lieutenants were looking at Hu Qiong's collapsing silhouette, their faces were red with anger. Hu Qiong, shouted the three other lieutenants at the same time. The three other lieutenants were looking at Hu Qiong's collapsing silhouette, their faces were red with anger. They then raised their heads and looked at Lin Feng with boiling killing intent. You dared to kill Hu Qiong, said one of the lieutenants sounding ice-cold while fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Did you not see it? Asked Lin Feng fearlessly. Lin Feng had an opportunity to kill his opponents, he wasn't going to miss it. Hu Qiong possessed the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Hu Qiong's axe was incredibly powerful to the extent that Lin Feng had been injured by the shock from his attack. If he hadn't killed Hu Qiong, it was the same as committing suicide. During a war, while two sides were fighting, all battles were a matter of life and death. Gur, the lieutenant gnashed his teeth. He hated Lin Feng and wanted to kill him, but Prince Mo Jia had given the order to capture Lin Feng alive. Nobody dared disobey Mo Jia's orders. You four, go and capture him, said the lieutenant while turning around to look at the four who had their faces covered. He sounded cold and commanding. No, we can't do that, said one of them. That lieutenant was surprised. His facial expression became even colder. Lin Feng was also surprised. It seemed like the relationship between them was not that good. But what kind of relationship did they have? We are willing to send out 3, but 2 of you have to help them to capture him. How does that sound? Continued the man whose face was covered. He sounded like he was the leader of those 4. All right, said the lieutenant after being unable to make up his mind for a brief period. He then nodded and said, if you don't fight with all your strength, don't blame me for being impolite. These 5 people moved towards Lin Feng, 2 lieutenants and 3 of the black guards with their faces covered. When these people released chi and force, Lin Feng felt that he was suffocating. How strong! These people had all broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. Looking solemn, Lin Feng's eyes slowly turned dark. His eyes became cold and expressionless. He gave the impression that he could control everything around him. He could perceive everything clearly, even each individual leaf rustling in the wind. While facing 5 strong cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer, Lin Feng was completely focused. What seemed like an endless quantity of battle energy was surrounding his body. The ground beneath Lin Feng was shaking and his armor was emitting metallic clangs. Lin Feng was firmly holding his sword. Even when facing 5 cultivators at the 7th Ling Qi layer, Lin Feng didn't flinch. On the path of cultivation, one of the best traits was a strong willpower and unwavering determination. Even if Lin Feng was facing 5 cultivators at the 7th Ling Qi layer, he wouldn't flinch. The only way out was a battle and everything else was destiny. That was the only path to reaching the clouds. Fearlessness led to supreme achievements. They could feel the powerful battle energy that Lin Feng was releasing, so the 5 cultivators remained vigilant. He had killed Hu Qiong, who had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer, with a single strike. They couldn't let their guards down and give Lin Feng an exploitable opportunity. First, injure him severely. You don't need to be merciful. Just don't kill him, said one of the lieutenants coldly. Their horses neighed as they all rushed towards Lin Feng. They were all attacking Lin Feng at the same time. Lin Feng's body flickered and just like a shadow moved backwards and avoided the attacks. These 5 people continued to move forwards and suddenly, Lin Feng's silhouette suddenly disappeared without trace. Impossible, these 5 cultivators were astonished. There was only a blurry, dark light which looked like a specter in his place. At the same time, a sensation of danger rose within their hearts. He has a shadow spirit. Unable to change the situation, the 5 people continued rushing towards the specter with regret in their hearts. Dark shadow, die, a subtle sound spread through the atmosphere and blood splashed into the air. The shadow passed by 2 of the black guards and immediately after, Lin Feng became visible again. These 5 people had not grouped together effectively. Lin Feng had his back towards 2 of the black guards who were charging towards him at full speed. However, as they got closer to Lin Feng, their bodies trembled and they fell down from their horses. They were already dead. That was the second part of the D-level skill, Cross Shadow, Dark Shadow. The cultivator could transform into an almost invisible and inaudible shadow. This was also the part which Protector Kong had never managed to master. However, Lin Feng, when releasing his celestial spirit, could use it with a small degree of mastery. Even though it wasn't perfect, he could still transform into a shadow which made him look like a transparent specter, barely visible. Besides, using that skill, he had easily killed 2 cultivators who had a higher cultivation than him. Of course, Lin Feng had to pay a huge price to do so. Lin Feng coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood and blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth. He hadn't mastered Dark Shadow, so he wasn't able to turn into a perfect shadow, which is why Lin Feng had been damaged by the opponent's attacks. However, he managed to kill 2 of them, which could be considered a great achievement. However, Lin Feng felt that his internal organs were badly injured. Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi was looking at Lin Feng and her cheeks were rosy. Why was Lin Feng doing all of this to save her? He was fighting so many strong opponents to save her. Bastard, furiously shouted the lieutenant who had not yet got involved. He immediately charged towards Lin Feng while throwing his most powerful punch. Lin Feng could perceive everything around him and could see that fist rushing towards him. Lin Feng quickly punched the ground with his right hand and propelled himself away from the attack. However, he was still affected by the power from that punch. Another mouthful of blood was coughed up as he landed. Lin Feng supported himself on the ground with one hand, but his face was incredibly pale. 8th Ling Qi layer. That lieutenant was also the strongest. He surprisingly had the strength of the 8th Ling Qi layer. You killed my brothers, you must die. As before, that lieutenant wasn't going to give up. He slammed his powerful foot into the ground and jumped through the air. He was launching another punch towards the injured Lin Feng. Boom! Lin Feng's body was propelled backwards. His injuries this time were much more severe. A moment before, he had already been severely injured, but now he had just received 2 punches from a cultivator of the 8th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng, today you will die. Piercingly cold, deadly energy emerged from the lieutenant's body. He was slowly walking towards Lin Feng. The prince wants him alive. If you kill him, you are disobeying the prince's orders, said one of the men with the helmet covering his face. The lieutenant was surprised. He then immediately said in a cold way, he killed 2 of my brothers, if I cannot kill him, I will cut off his arms. Cut off my arms, said Lin Feng while raising his head. His dark and expressionless eyes looked even more determined. He stood up and an incredible quantity of battle energy emerged from his body. This battle energy was insanely fluctuating around Lin Feng's body. Suddenly a gigantic ice spirit appeared behind Lin Feng and it seemed to reach the sky. It seemed like the entire area was instantly frozen. The temperature immediately dropped. Sword Qi was whistling through the atmosphere. It was sharp and deadly. When the others saw that, they were stupefied. Lin Feng was still able to release such incredible battle energy, his willpower and determination was incredible. He took a step forward looking calm and detached, but after that step, the battle energy around Lin Feng's body turned into a violent tempest which started to rage in the center of the ice. The lieutenant was astonished. He narrowed his eyes. Lin Feng was incredibly dangerous. It seemed like his 2 types of energy had fused together with the energy from heaven and earth. It seemed like Lin Feng could take on anyone, including the lieutenant. He was showing the traits of a true hero. He had incredible willpower and zeal. His heart was fearless, filled with determination and he felt like he could annihilate everything in his path. Die! Said Lin Feng with a calm voice. However, he didn't use his sword. He used his finger and formed it into a sword. It seemed like his finger had become a real sword. More and more force fused together with the other energy. He was using an energy attack. When Lin Feng raised his finger, it sounded like the air was being pierced by a sword. Boom! The lieutenant quickly released his fierce beast spirit, which released an incredible power. It was an extremely strong spirit, a huge fierce beast that looked like a small mountain. He had the impression that Lin Feng was extremely dangerous. Even though he had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer, he was sure that he needed to use all his strength against Lin Feng. He used his most powerful attack, Oblivion Fist, and launched himself toward Lin Feng. Boom! The ground was shaking. An insanely strong wind rose between them, clouds of dust were fiercely blown in all directions. Come back! Lin Feng was violently pushed back but ignored the blood coming from his mouth. Besides, as if his energy was inexhaustible, more piercingly cold qi, more sword qi and more battle energy emerged from body in what seemed to be an endless supply. Boom! The ground immediately caved in and a huge crater appeared where Lin Feng stood. Lin Feng was blown backwards once again and he unceasingly continued to cough up mouthfuls of blood. Duan Xianyi couldn't stand watching this scene any longer. However, it seemed like the quantity of qi emerging from Lin Feng's body didn't stop increasing. All the energy he released was fusing together. That fearless battle energy was becoming as powerful and majestic as the earth and the heavens. The lieutenant was looking at Lin Feng's expressionless eyes and at his ever-increasing qi. His facial expression became even more serious and his fierce beast spirit started to move while roaring loudly. The lieutenant was looking at Lin Feng's expressionless eyes and at his ever-increasing qi. His facial expression became even more serious and his fierce beast spirit started to move while roaring loudly. Die! Shouted the lieutenant. The palm of his hand rushed towards Lin Feng. It was filled with extreme strength and it suddenly transformed into a huge bestial hand. The palm had become large enough to cover Lin Feng's entire body. This was clearly the strength of his spirit. Boom! That incredible force was crashing through the air towards Lin Feng. It felt like even the ground beneath him was shaking under the pressure. He felt like he was suffocating. However, his battle energy wasn't disappearing. Lin Feng was fearless. Instead of using a single finger, he used his entire fist and started to concentrate all of his energy into it. His entire fist became sharper than a sword. Anything that fist touched would be pierced straight through. The lieutenant's palm and Lin Feng's fist collided with a brutal explosion. Boom! Another extremely loud sound filled the air. The ground under Lin Feng's feet had cracked. The lieutenant was like a massive ferocious beast and he struck like a mountain crashing down onto Lin Feng. The noises has suddenly stopped and then the extreme power of the lieutenant's hand started oppressing Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng felt like his bones and internal organs were going to explode. He was badly injured but was still standing upright and he wasn't moving back at all, which caused everyone to blankly stare at him. After a moment the atmosphere became silent. Dripping blood was following the lieutenant's hand as it moved. What nobody knew is that a moment before, Lin Feng's fist had pierced the palm of his hand. There was a huge hole in its center. However, he didn't stop because he knew that Lin Feng's injuries were more severe than his own. At that moment, Lin Feng's fist was still against the lieutenant's palm. They were standing there motionless. Lin Feng's eyes were expressionless and he could clearly feel everything within his surroundings. That was Lin Feng's own world of darkness. His bones had been broken and his internal organs had been severely damaged. He could collapse at any moment and breathe his last breath, but, as before, he was standing tall. In his own world, ice was blue, sword energy was white and battle energy was golden. Everything, in his world, could be seen within his mind. He could borrow force from the world and use it to help him to carry out even more powerful attacks. Energy attacks were the highest achievement he had for using this method. He could make different types of energy fuse together and become even more powerful. Shockingly, each attack could be much stronger when fused than when using a massive amount of a single force. However, no matter if it was force or energy attacks, they were all absorbed from the outside world. They didn't belong to Lin Feng and did not count as his own strength. They were just tools that he could use to harness his strength. They required comprehension and represented a limited power. In the middle of his own world, Lin Feng had to use his own strength. In Lin Feng's world, the three colors were spinning and fusing together. At the same time, around Lin Feng's body, there was no ice, no sword energy and no burning battle energy. At that moment, he looked like an ordinary person who didn't even practice cultivation. There was absolutely nothing exceptional about him. However, while looking extremely common, there was still something mysterious, something which seemed like a heavenly mystery. Lin Feng's body was absorbing the pure qi from heaven and earth, and that pure qi was being absorbed into every cell of his body. Lin Feng's bones, flesh, and muscles were constantly strengthening. His entire skeleton was emitting cracking sounds as if it was trying to reassemble itself from the broken state. The path of cultivation that a person walked could change their entire destiny. That sort of change wasn't brought about by a person's strength. Cultivation could modify cultivators' bones, flesh and muscles to make the body more suitable and stronger in accordance with a person's will. The bones could enhance and become a host for a stronger body. Flesh and muscles could be strengthened and blood vessels could be enhanced. A person's temperament was the only thing that could strengthen the power of the mind and spirit. A person's temperament would be affected by the cultivator's training method and actions. It was also the subject of constant change. Bones constantly needed to change and become stronger in order to be in perfect harmony with the strengthened body. That sort of change required damage. The bones had to be broken before they could become stronger. The weak flesh needed to be destroyed before it could become more resilient. When the body was broken it could continue to become stronger, however this was only meant for within cultivation practice, not battle. It was as if Lin Feng had changed the rules. He had only broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer and his bones had been broken by external damage. This wasn't done in the process of cultivation, but during battle. However, Lin Feng was using the external forces to gain a better understanding of cultivation and to strengthen his body. He had broken bones yet he was still standing. The people who were present were astonished. Their hearts were racing. They could feel that Lin Feng had changed but they couldn't say what had changed about him. He still seemed to be the same person as before. His temperament had completely changed. At that moment, it seemed like Lin Feng, the heavens, and the earth were all in perfect harmony. It seemed like his true nature was finally revealed. Lin Feng seemed incredibly dangerous at that moment. The lieutenant who was fighting against him had a clear advantage, but he couldn't help but feel a terrible premonition as if he was in great danger. That feeling of insecurity made him quick to act again. He stamped his foot into the ground like a huge ferocious beast. The ground shook and a cloud of dust rose in the air. The lieutenant raised his head and rushed like a madman toward Lin Feng. The palm of a gigantic hand appeared again and rushed towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng moved his hand slightly and immediately swiped his hand in the direction of the illusionary palm. A bright light filled the air from the collision. When the light disappeared, the scent of blood filled the air. A hand had been cut off and was sent flying through the air. Immediately after, an extremely loud and painful shriek could be heard. Ah! My hand! A short moment after, the lieutenant realized that his hand was missing. He looked at his left forearm but there was no hand attached and only a fountain of blood pouring from his arm. A hideous expression covered his face. How was this possible? Even most cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer who were using weapons would not even scratch his skin. His fierce beast spirit was extremely strong. When using his beast spirit, his offensive and defensive abilities were terrifyingly high. However, at that moment, his hand had easily been sliced off. He didn't even know where that bright and resplendent light came from. There were absolutely no weapons in Lin Feng's hands. The other people were also staring at Lin Feng. They were astonished. That bright and resplendent light a moment before was Lin Feng's hand. At that moment, Lin Feng didn't look ordinary any longer. He was standing there and his entire body looked like it had transformed into a sword, an extremely terrifying sword. His body was a sword and his sword was his body. That bright and resplendent light had come from his hand because his entire body was a sword. Sword fusion. The crowd was astonished. Indeed, that was one of the sword force layers, sword and body fusion. Lin Feng had broken through to another layer of mastery regarding forces. Lin Feng only had the strength of the 6th Ling Qi layer but could surprisingly understand some of the mysteries of the Xian Qi layer, which even some cultivators of the Xian Qi layer couldn't understand. His natural talent and intelligence was monstrous. "Cut," said Lin Feng in a low voice. Lin Feng raised his hand again. The lieutenant was covering the stump on his forearm with his other hand and suddenly started shaking in fear. He wanted to move back but it was already too late. The mysterious bright light rose again and sliced into the lieutenant's throat like a flash. Lin Feng looked surprised. Lin Feng looked surprised. The two others with their helmets covering their faces also looked at Lin Feng. They peculiar look in their eyes. "Lin Feng, the three of us will not fight against you. You can leave," said one of them sounding cold. They had all moved out of Lin Feng's path together. "You guys are all right with my decision, right?" The two others remained silent and immediately nodded. "Let's go," said the leader of the men. Immediately after, they turned around and left. They saw that Lin Feng didn't intend to stop them. Their horses neighed and they then started galloping away at full speed fearing that Lin Feng might change his mind. But when they had both caught up to the leader of the group, a brutal energy crashed into their bodies. The sound of thunder spread through the atmosphere and blood poured from the two black guards' mouths. Immediately after, another strike of that powerful energy hit them from behind. They could only feel their body go rigid. They tried to release their own energy and move away, but it was already too late. At the moment when they tried to move themselves away, a lethal hand strike pierced both of their chests, killing them in an instant. Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi were astonished. They slowly turned around and looked at the final remaining black guard. They only saw that he was moving towards them. When he arrived in front of Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi, he said, "Lin Feng, even though you have become stronger at the critical moment, you are now very weak and cannot fight for much longer. I advise that you to avoid future trouble and to find a place to rest." "Huh?" Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. He knew that he was very weak at that moment. Indeed, even though Lin Feng's broken bones had started to reassemble themselves and he could fuse with his sword, his bones still hadn't completely recovered. Besides, his internal organs had been severely damaged. Lin Feng perfectly understood that he was in no state to continue fighting. When he saw that the man wanted to leave without killing him, he felt like he was truly too weak. Besides, Lin Feng couldn't understand why that person was willing to help him. Who is that person really? Why was he with the black guards? "Who are you?" asked Lin Feng. "You don't need to know who I am, Lin Feng. You have a strong determination and willpower, you are fearless, these qualities are engraved deep in your heart and they make you the cultivator that you are today. Not everybody can be like that, many people chose to be scared of dying and suffer in silence," said the man without answering Lin Feng's question. "Lin Feng, this war between our two countries is not as simple to understand as you imagine. Behind the curtains, we are just pawns, nobodies. They will sacrifice us at any time to achieve what they desire, like savage animal. This time, you took a risk but it wasn't worth it because nothing was going to happen to the princess," said the man with the helmet still covering his face. His eyes, which were visible, were looking at Lin Feng and looked sincere. "Don't forget to not return using the same road you used to come. Not all the MOU army will die during the war, or at least, Mo will not die. Wait until they come back to Mou and then you can go back to Shuiyu. Finally, it is my wish that you will make the Yunhai sect rise once again. When that man finished talking, he turned around and galloped away at full speed. His silhouette gradually disappeared on the horizon. Lin Feng was looking at that silhouette from behind and lights were flashing in his eyes. 1,000 thoughts were flashing through his mind. Make the Yunhai sect rise once again, repeated Lin Feng in a low voice. That man had said that Lin Feng was determined and fearless, that these values were deeply engraved in his heart, and said that many people suffered in silence, scared for their lives. Maybe this person was speaking of himself, suffering in silence to save his own life. That person must have been a former member of the Yunhai sect. Indeed, that person was indeed a former member of the Yunhai sect. Besides, he had chosen to take refuge in the holy courtyard of Shuiyu to save his own life, which is why he said those words. That person had skills as limpid as water, he was extremely strong and had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer. In Lin Feng's mind, he could only think of one person. There had been an incredibly strong disciple in the Yunhai sect. Ling Hu. He shone. That person used to be the first disciple of the Yunhai sect core disciples, Ling Hu Hishan. Lin Feng, this war between our two countries is not as simple to understand as you imagine. Behind the curtains, we are just pawns, nobodies. They will sacrifice us at any time to achieve what they desire, like savage animal. This time, you took a risk, but it wasn't worth it because nothing was going to happen to the princess. Lin Feng recalled Ling Hu Hishan's words once again. His heart was pounding. Indeed, Ling Hu Hishan had been at the princess' side, which meant that the 4 men with helmets covering their faces were all students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu as well as black guards had been working together to secure the princess. People who were meant to be absolute enemies had been collaborating. The leader of the Mou armies was Mo Jia and the leader of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was Duan Tianlang. When Lin Feng thought about that, cold killing intent invaded his entire body and penetrated into his heart and even his bones. This war was like a chess game. Its outcome was planned from the beginning. The fact that the princess had been kidnapped, the chaos amongst the troops, the lives of a few 100,000 soldiers, everything had been planned from the beginning and was part of their plan. Everything had been planned so that the people behind the curtains could achieve their goals. These people wanted Lin Feng dead, which is why they captured the princess in Lin Feng's presence and had then blamed Lu Tsanglan. That tragedy had led to the death of hundreds of thousands of people. However, Lin Feng had given his best to ruin their plans. He had been unwilling to give up and had made great efforts to find the princess. Was that really worth it though? Fortunately, Lin Feng hadn't died. He had gained enlightenment through battle and had learned how to master sword fusion. He was much stronger now than before. Lin Feng stood there while remaining silent. Finally, he moved and took a deep breath, all his thoughts vanished like smoke. Lin Feng had a clear conscience and had stuck to his beliefs. That was enough. That plot and the conspiracy to take his life had actually helped him to become stronger. His path of cultivation would allow him to reach the clouds and to destroy any plots or conspiracies that came his way. Lin Feng turned around and looked at Duan Xinyi with a cold and indifferent glare. He was absolutely expressionless as if he was looking at a stranger. Lin Feng, said Duan Xinyi when she saw Lin Feng's expression. Lin Feng's cold expression made her heart start to race. She just saw Lin Feng raise his hand, and in a flash, the vines constricting her body were cut down. When he finished, Lin Feng turned around and left, while surprisingly ignoring Duan Xinyi. Initially, she was a good person and was safe inside the capital. But because she decided to come to the battlefield, hundreds of thousands of people had to die. Lin Feng himself had almost died trying to save her. Lin Feng, I didn't know, said Duan Xinyi in a low voice. Her eyes were moist. She had heard Ling Hu Hishan and obviously understood everything he said. She also knew what Lin Feng was thinking at that moment. As a princess, she had played the key role in the conspiracy. How could all these things be unclear to her? She was royalty who could pass the heavy curtains to enter the imperial palace. Besides, Lin Feng had already asked her why she wanted to come to the battlefield even though it wasn't necessary for her to be there and was even dangerous. That conspiracy was obviously the reason why she had come. She could perfectly understand Lin Feng's feelings. Lin Feng continued forward. He didn't look like he intended to stop. He looked steady and firm. Lin Feng, I really didn't know, said Duan Xinyi. Tears were flowing from her eyes. She felt a heavy pain gripping her heart. Only a woman in love could feel such a pain within her heart. Maybe she had actually fallen in love. A horse-driven carriage was moving down an ancient road. A horse-driven carriage was moving down an ancient road. 3 horses were pulling the carriage. Behind that carriage, there were many people riding horses and acting as guards. Niai, the person driving the carriage, pulled back on the reins and came to a stop. Then, guards on the right and left of the carriage continued moving forwards. A person was lying on the ground. That person was wearing the armor of a soldier. Fu Bo, his heartbeat is normal, there is no irregularity at all. He's alive but unconscious, said one man to the driver of the carriage while checking the person's body. Move him to the side of the road. We have to hurry, said the driver of the carriage indifferently. The man was about to execute the order, but at that moment, a pair of lily-white hands opened the curtains of the carriage. A delicate face appeared from behind the curtains. It was a beautiful young girl, she was very young. Lights were flashing in her eyes. Fu Bo, how could a soldier end up here lying on the road? Asked the young woman whose voice was clear and limpid. Fu Bo shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but in our country, ordinary soldiers are not that strong. Except for soldiers whose rank is lieutenant or above, the others are not considered strong on the battlefield. That person must be extremely weak, which would explain why he was abandoned on the road. Oh, said the young girl while slightly nodding. A light flashed in her eyes and she said, take him with us in the carriage. Miss, this is not appropriate, said Fu Bo, who was surprised. It doesn't matter, Fu Bo, said the young girl while ignoring him and smiling. She then talked to the man who was standing at the soldier's side and said, carry him over here and put him inside the carriage. That guards glanced at Fu Bo. However, Fu Bo had no choice but to nod. The guards had no other choice but to carry the unconscious soldier into the carriage. The carriage then slowly continued moving forwards. In the carriage, there was delicate young woman and young girl who was about 10 years old. She was also very pretty. Ziling, why did you bring a stranger into the carriage? Asked the young woman. She was curiously looking at the young soldier lying down in the carriage. She could help but frown. Zi, big sister, look, he looks so young, can you guess his age? Said the young beautiful little girl as if she hadn't heard the original question. She looked very curious as well. Ziling glanced at Zi and slightly shook her head. She then looked at the lying young man and frowned. Suddenly, she looked perplexed. What a delicate and handsome young man, thought Zi while sighing. Even though that young man was unconscious, his face was delicate, he had dashing eyebrows and his cheeks looked extremely delicate. His entire body was covered with dust from the road. That young man didn't look like a soldier, why was he wearing armor? Zi, sister, that young man and you seem to be the same age. He's very handsome. You would be a perfect couple, said Ziling. Don't talk nonsense, said Zi. Zi, sister, I'm just joking, I know that your husband would have to be stronger than you. You have already broken through to the 3rd Ling Qi layer, you're a genius. He's very young and he's a soldier, how could he be stronger than you, said Ziling while smiling. Zi was just shaking her head. Ziling, instead of talking about me, you should be talking about your cultivation, especially your sword skills. He laughed Ziling. Ziling then said, Zi, sister, why does Ziqiang suddenly want to get married? I didn't think that he had a girl he liked. When Zi heard Ziling, she frowned and immediately said, the day of the offerings for the gods and ancestors is approaching. Ziqiang needs to be married to gain access to the forbidden area. Therefore, his wedding is a very normal thing. Concerning the girl, I heard that they've only known each other for a few days. Otherwise, I don't much more than you. A light flashed in Ziling's eyes and then she shook her head as a sign that she didn't understand such complicated things. But at that moment, the young man lying in the carriage moved his finger. Ziling was surprised and said, he's awake. Then, the young man's hand started to move. Immediately after, he opened his eyes. The young man's eyes were big and beautiful, but at that moment, his eyes revealed uncertainty. That young man was Lin Feng. On that day, after the conversation with Duan Xinyi, he left her and walked for a great distance. He didn't get the impression that something was wrong with his body, but suddenly, he fainted and did not know what happened after that. He had no idea what happened. He didn't even know how many days had passed since that moment. Ziling and Zi were surprised when they saw Lin Feng. What a handsome young man. At that moment, his eyes were open as he laid on the floor of the carriage. Where am I? Asked Lin Feng while looking at the two girls. He looked perplexed. You're awake. My name is Ziling. You were lying on the road and we accidentally came across you, so we took you into our carriage, said Ziling while blinking unceasingly. She then said, oh, by the way, how did you faint on that road? And are you a soldier? What is your military ranking? How strong are you? Ziling was unceasingly asking questions which caused Lin Feng's mind to spin. He said in a weak voice, is it okay if I get up first? Oh, okay, said Ziling a bit embarrassed. Immediately after, Lin Feng, who was lying on the floor, stood up and sat down opposite the girl. My name is Lin Feng. I fainted because I was injured. I am just an ordinary soldier. My strength is... While talking, Lin Feng tried to gather some of his pure qi, but then, he suddenly looked astonished. He just had the feeling that he was empty inside and there wasn't even a trace of pure qi. What's wrong? Lin Feng's heart was pounding. His eyes were turbulent. He remembered that he had become stronger. He should have become much stronger, but at that moment, he surprisingly couldn't manage to condense any pure qi. There wasn't any pure qi inside of his body any longer. What's wrong? Asked Ziling when she saw that Lin Feng's facial expression changed so drastically. She then asked, you were just about to tell us how strong you were. Lin Feng glanced at Ziling and immediately after, he closed his eyes. He could still clearly perceive everything around him. Even without releasing the first layer of his celestial spirit, he was still able to perceive every part of his body, the muscles, the flesh and the blood vessels. He could perfectly sense everything that was happening within his body. If Lin Feng wanted, he could perceive everything that was happening around him to a circumference of 1,000 kilometers, the whole world would become an image within his mind. Indeed, I have become stronger and it even seems that my bones, flesh and muscles are much stronger than before. Lin Feng opened his eyes and used one hand to violently punch the palm of his other hand. He had gained impressive strength. Even though there was no pure qi, while considering his body's strength, he was much stronger than he was before. That meant that he now had a stronger constitution. However, Lin Feng persistently tried to control pure qi, but something was wrong. It seemed like there was absolutely no pure qi within his body. What the hell has happened to me? Thought Lin Feng while frowning. He had become stronger but did not have any pure qi. What was that supposed to mean? Could it be that, after he became stronger and mastered his sword fusion, something strange happened to his body? Why would his pure qi have run dry? Lin Feng tried to absorb pure qi into his body again, but it would only circulate within his body, it wouldn't penetrate inside or be absorbed. It seemed like the external world and the inside of his body were completely separated. Whatever he tried, it seemed like the universe did not agree. Lin Feng had never heard of such a condition, let alone seen it. He didn't understand what was happening to him. Lin Feng was firmly frowning for a long time and then tried to relax. His cultivation was unlikely to have been crippled. Maybe it was something good, maybe he had entered an unknown path on the road to cultivation. While thinking that, Lin Feng felt a bit relieved. At that moment, there was no amazing energy inside of him, but it wasn't a bad thing. He still had the qi that an ordinary person who did not practice cultivation would have. He even looked even more handsome. "Why are you not talking?" asked Ziling while looking at Lin Feng after seeing that his facial expression didn't stop changing while he remained silent. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Ziling. He then said, "It seems like I have no strength at all." "No strength?" sighed Ziling, surprised. She had a strange expression on her face. "A piece of trash then?" said Zi straightforwardly. She frowned. A person who had no strength was obviously a piece of trash. In the continent, nobody could gain a high place within society if they weren't strong. They would systematically thrown aside even if they were handsome. At that moment, she looked at Lin Feng with disdain. When Lin Feng heard the expression, "piece of trash," he raised his head and saw that both girls were looking at him with different looks than before. It made him feel exasperated. When Lin Feng heard the expression, "piece of trash," he raised his head and saw that both girls were looking at him with different looks than before. It made him feel exasperated. In the world of cultivation, those who were not strong would only be thrown away. However, some people, even though they thought that way, didn't show what they thought to other people, which was much better than how Zi was behaving. "Ziling, let's kick him out of the carriage," said Zi in a cold and detached way. She sounded calm and unscrupulous. At that moment, she only thought about the fact that the person she was looking at was a piece of trash, even though he was handsome. "Are you not a soldier? How come you don't practice cultivation? Haven't you at least broken through to the qi layer?" asked Ziling while looking at Lin Feng. She was looking at him with a strange look. "I was injured and now it seems like I don't have the slightest bit of strength," said Lin Feng while shaking his head. He wasn't going to get angry because of Ziyi's words. Lin Feng had just gone through war. He had gone through a great deal of horrible things and seen oceans of blood flowing on the battlefield. His heart had matured and he realized that his previous actions were childish. His temperament had evolved. It would now be difficult for him to be affected by the words of others. "Oh," said Ziling while nodding. She was looking at Lin Feng while looking pensive as if she was thinking about a solution for Lin Feng. "Ziling, if the people of the mountain village know that we have a piece of trash inside the carriage, they will make fun of us and laugh. Let's kick him out, okay?" said Zi again. She really had no manners, talking about Lin Feng to his face. A piece of trash was nothing to them, so she didn't need to speak in a tactful way. Even if he felt humiliated, it did not matter. "Ziyi, sister, meeting him was fate. There is no need to be so heartless and cruel," said Ziling while shaking her head, and then said, "Lin Feng, I will allow you to act as my servant. You will be under my care and you can enter our mountain village." "Servant?" Lin Feng was astonished. "Become her slave?" In his heart, he was smiling wryly. He wouldn't have thought that he would be forced into servitude like that, but he was still within the borders of Mou while unable to absorb pure qi. He had no cultivation. If he ventured alone, he would probably encounter a dangerous situation, therefore, it was better for him to act as a servant. If he regained his strength, who would dare treat him like a servant? Lin Feng slightly nodded and didn't express his opinion. "Very good, then it is settled," said Ziling while smiling. Zi remained silent while shaking her head. The Ziwei mountain village was surrounded by mountains. It was a quiet and beautiful place. It was situated in the north of Mou. It was a place of great influence and it belonged to the Z clan. It was said that the strongest cultivator of the Z clan was at the SHENG layer. Besides, the Z clan was extremely old, even older than the MOU country. However, as time passed, its influence declined. Ling was the eldest daughter of the Ziwei Mountain Village clan. Yi had been adopted and raised by Ling's father. Therefore, in the Ziwei Mountain Village, Ling had more authority than Yi, which is why even though Yi wanted to make Lin Feng leave the carriage, if Ling didn't accept, Yi had no choice but to accept it. The Ziwei Mountain Village was extremely vast. The place where Ling lived was picturesque, clear water and green gardens. It was surrounded by a huge garden and emerald bamboo trees. It looked particularly peaceful. At this moment, Lin Feng was holding a broom and was sweeping the courtyard of the garden. However, he wasn't paying attention to the ground at all, he was lost in his own thoughts. He was able to sense the pure qi of heaven and earth, his perception was even clearer and more distinct than before, but he was still unable to absorb it and make it penetrate his body. That strange condition was troubling him so much that his heart started to race as he thought about it. A single leaf was floating on the wind. Lin Feng looked at that leaf and could distinctly perceive where it was going and where it would land on the ground. Lin Feng grabbed the broom with his left hand and raised his right hand, like a sword, he moved it towards the leaf in an attempt to cut it. Even though there was no pure qi and no sword energy, his hands still moved like a sword with incredible strength. However, when Lin Feng's hand got close to the leaf, it just moved away and continued floating through the air. He couldn't touch it and couldn't catch it. It would move away from him every time. Lin Feng could only slice through the air, but not cut the leaf. I cannot cut it. Lin Feng was a bit surprised. The leaf fell onto the ground. A tree leaf was simple but Lin Feng couldn't touch it. Even though the position of the leaf was perfectly clear in his mind, he was unable to predict its next movements. If he tried to touch the leaf, its trajectory would change. If Lin Feng could control pure qi, it would have been very easy for him to cut a leaf, but at that moment, even though his hand was still like a sword, he was unable to cut the leaf. Even though I am fused with my sword, it seems that it's not enough, as if something is missing, whispered Lin Feng. Even though he was, indeed, stronger than before, Lin Feng had the impression he was in front of a locked door and was only single step away from unlocking it. He was in a complex situation, and if he didn't take the next step, he wouldn't be able to absorb pure qi. I remember on the day when I became stronger, my bones had been broken, my internal organs were severely wounded, my determination had allowed me to make battle energy, sword energy, and ice energy fuse all together. Like that, I had transformed into a sharp sword. What I was thinking about at that moment was my sword more than the energy attack. I had managed to carry out sword fusion. My determination is what played the decisive role in me becoming stronger, whispered Lin Feng, trying to recall the moment when he gained his strength. I managed to carry out my sword fusion by relying on my spirit, on the first layer of my celestial spirit. It helped become physically stronger and become more aware of the world surrounding me. My spirit enabled me to understand my sword in a much greater detail and allowed me to fuse with my sword. It seems like amongst all the things I understood, there is something that I am missing, as if I do not yet have the requirements to use my current strength, thought Lin Feng while his heart was pounding as if he had just received a glimpse of enlightenment. His spirit was extremely strong and had enabled him to become stronger and reach this unique situation. However, it seemed like that without using the power of his spirit, he wasn't strong enough to use the power. Therefore, because of his special condition, he was unable to absorb pure qi. I use battle energy, ice energy, sword energy, and fuse them together as a sword. It's not battle energy and it's not ice energy. Even though it is a leaf, it follows the force of the wind without being cut. Could I make the energy of heaven and earth fuse with the leaf? Lin Feng was holding the broom and was lost in thought. He was standing in the huge garden facing the bamboo forest while remaining completely motionless. A middle-aged man and Ziyi stopped walking when they saw Lin Feng in the garden. "Father, this is the piece of trash that we came across last time. Ziling insisted on him coming to the village mountain, to let him take care of the garden and let him live here, explained Zi to the middle-aged man while looking at Lin Feng. At that moment, the middle-aged man was fixedly staring at Lin Feng looking pensive. "Father, don't you want to kick him out?" said Zi when she saw that the middle-aged man remained silent. "Stop talking," said the middle-aged man while staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng was standing there remaining motionless, but dust was flowing around him as if there was a vortex created around Lin Feng. It was very subtle, it was impossible to notice it without paying extreme attention. Zi glanced at Lin Feng and didn't know what her father was looking at. Her eyes were filled with disdain and then she didn't look at Lin Feng again. A piece of trash wasn't worth her attention. "Father, I'm going to call Ziling," said Zi to the middle-aged man. Her father ignored her. She shook her head and moved towards the house in the middle of the garden. After she left, something strange happened. The vortex surrounding Lin Feng was becoming faster and more violent. Besides, Lin Feng had a marvelous expression on his face. At that moment, Lin Feng seemed to be fusing with heaven and earth. The middle-aged man was amazed. "How strange," whispered the middle-aged man. At that moment, Lin Feng was giving him an extraordinary impression. "How strange," whispered the middle-aged man. At that moment, Lin Feng was giving him an extraordinary impression. When looking at Lin Feng's back, he had the feeling he was looking at a celestial being. Lin Feng made his heartbeat race. Was Lin Feng really the person Zi was talking about? Has he come to the Ziwei mountain village to become a servant, or is it because he doesn't care about what we think of him and seeks to advance his cultivation? Thought the middle-aged man. On the continent, it wasn't uncommon for disciples belonging to powerful clans to practice cultivation on a journey. Some of them went to war and gained experience on the battlefield while others degraded themselves to become slaves to test their determination, to change their state of mind. The middle-aged man thought that Lin Feng probably belonged to the second category. Otherwise, that young man would unlikely be standing there while controlling the qi of heaven and earth. How could he become a servant and clean the garden in a small mountain village? The middle-aged man took a step and then started walking slowly towards Lin Feng. However, he was walking very carefully, trying not to make any sound. He was afraid that he would interrupt Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng's state of mind was as limpid as water. He was absolutely lost in his thoughts, not paying attention to his surroundings. On that day, when I reached my current state, around my body was battle energy, ice energy and sword energy, before I made all the energy fuse together. Why did it become sword energy? Why didn't it become ice energy or battle energy? Lin Feng kept asking himself thousands of questions. A sword can have sword force, a blade can have blade force, a sword can be used to carry out an energy attack just like a blade. When a cultivator masters the sword, they can fuse with their sword. When they master the blade, they can fuse together with their blade. Well, what about the other types of energy? For example, a moment ago, the leaf was floating on the wind. However, a leaf has leaf force, when the wind controlling the leaf has wind force. Force is present in all things and can be used for energy attacks and fused. Swords and blades are not the only things which produce force. It should be possible to fuse with all of the 10,000 things of creation. Lin Feng felt like he had realized something. He suddenly gained enlightenment. Lin Feng raised his hand in the air and slashed it through the air, like a shadow. His movement was invisible. Suddenly, a leaf was cut into hundreds of pieces which floated through the air. Even though Lin Feng was closing his eyes, he had a feeling of absolute control, as if he could control everything around him. He had the same feeling as when he was using his spirit, but it was different to some extent. Zinan said, "Young cultivator, this is the best cultivation location of the Ziwei mountain, which is why we built the village here. Young cultivator, you can immediately go inside. Besides, there are many purity stones inside. you can use however many you need. Zinan was very generous. Having the opportunity to get acquainted with such a rare young genius was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lin Feng slightly nodded and went into the room. The pure qi of heaven and earth condensed into a white fog. Lin Feng wouldn't have thought that a place like Ziwei would have such a great place for cultivation. When Lin Feng arrived inside, he saw a myriad of purity stones on the ground. He sat cross-legged and entered into a tranquil state of mind. Suddenly, Lin Feng fused with the earth and a colossal amount of pure qi started penetrating into his body at a shocking speed. With eagerness, Lin Feng absorbed as much of the pure qi that was rushing into him as possible. Lin Feng didn't spend too much time in the cultivation room. 1 hour later, he left the room. When he came out, Zinan was sitting on the ground waiting for Lin Feng. "Young cultivator," said Zinan while standing up. He had a smile on his face. At that moment, there was nothing strange about Lin Feng, as if he was the exact same person that entered the room. However, Lin Feng was shrouded in mystery. "Let's go," said Lin Feng. The two of them left and went back towards the garden. Ziyi and Ziling were looking for their father everywhere. At that moment, by coincidence, they turned around and saw their father. When they saw that he was with Lin Feng, they couldn't help but be surprised. Ziyi shouted, "Father! Ziling and I have been looking for you everywhere." "Dad, we are getting ready to leave," said Ziling while smiling. She then looking at Lin Feng and said, "Lin Feng, you can tidy this place and then make preparations for our departure." "How dare you!" shouted Zinan. Ziling was slightly surprised. She then saw that Zinan was staring at her and was about to add something, but Lin Feng spoke first. "Miss, where are you going? Our clan also controls the government of the Ziwei. In a few days, the young master Ziqiong will get married, and because we are related, we obviously have to go and congratulate him. This is why I asked Ziling and Ziyi to prepare to leave for the Z government," replied Zinan before either of the girls could respond. Lin Feng nodded to indicate that he understood. Lin Feng understood that the young master of their clan was going to get married and they had to go pay respects. "Daddy, we've heard that Ziqiong's wife is very beautiful, much more beautiful than all the women in the clan. Besides, she's from Shuiyu. I also heard that she did not want to marry him. Is this really true?" said Ziling while shaking her head. Her eyes were filled with curiosity while looking towards Zinan. "Don't talk nonsense," said Zinan while frowning. Immediately after, he said in a low voice, "There are some rumors which say that the beautiful woman is the princess of Shuiyu, but it is not confirmed. We cannot talk about this on the outside." "Oh, I see," said Ziling while blinking. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, he was shaking. The princess of Shuiyu? Lin Feng knew that there was only one princess in Shuiyu, and that was Duan Xinyi. Could it be her? Lin Feng frowned. On that day, Lin Feng had stormed away from Duan Xinyi and didn't know what had happened to her. Besides, from what Zinan was saying, that woman was the princess of Shuiyu. She was beautiful, and besides, it seemed like she was being forced into the marriage. The chances of her being Duan Xinyi were high. "Master, I will come with you," said Lin Feng to Zinan. Zinan was surprised. He looked at Lin Feng with a serious look. He was obviously not going to refuse. "Could it be that you want to go because you heard that the woman was very beautiful? Is it why you are so impatient to leave?" said Ziyi with a smile on her face while looking at Lin Feng before adding, "But the future husband is Ziqiong, you are only a servant. Your social status is way too low. Don't even have such thoughts or you might die. The best thing you can do is continue your life as a lowly servant." "Shut up," shouted Zinan and immediately looked at Lin Feng. "Lin Feng, young cultivator, if you want to go then you can take my place. I hope that you will look after my two girls until they arrive." Zinan's logic was simple. He was hoping that, by spending some time alone with his girls, Lin Feng would get along with them. Zinan's logic was simple. He was hoping that, by spending some time alone with his girls, Lin Feng would get along with them. Ziling was a few years younger than Lin Feng. Ziyi and Lin Feng were about the same age. Even though they couldn't be considered as very beautiful, they were cute. Besides, they were quite strong. If Lin Feng could get along with them, that would be a nice thing. Of course, even if he didn't manage to get along with them, he could still ensure their protection. What could he have against them traveling together? However, at that moment, Ziyi and Ziling were surprised. They were looking at their father, Zinan. In a strange way, their father was calling Lin Feng, young cultivator. "Dad, what did you call him?" asked Ziling, who was very surprised. Usually, her father almost never scolded her, and at that moment, he had already scolded her twice because of Lin Feng. "Ziling, Ziyi, your behavior is inadmissible. Lin Feng's cultivation level is much more advanced than yours. The fact that he is patient and accommodating with you is just due to his kind and magnanimous personality. You just don't know how to distinguish good from bad. Daring to treat him as a servant, you are really shameless." Zinan scolded his two daughters again. His words were profound and meaningful. He then said, "This time, I will let Lin Feng go with you. You two should ask Lin Feng for advice and listen to what he tells you. You should make sure to stay friendly with him. His cultivation level is much more advanced than ours," said Ziling while staring at Lin Feng. She was extremely curious. She then said, "Father, are really not mistaken? Father, you shouldn't trust him. He is a nobody," said Ziyi, who didn't believe her father's words. She was a genius and had already broken through to the third Ling Qi layer. Besides, she was about the same age as Lin Feng, so it was impossible for him to be stronger than her. "Shut up! How dare you doubt my words," shouted Zinan, who had no alternative but to shout. He then continued, "Hurry up and go pack your things, get ready to leave." "Humph." Ziyi poked out her tongue and immediately dragged Ziling to leave. While looking at the two girls leave, Zinan shook his head and he then looked at Lin Feng with a wry smile on his face. "Young cultivator, my daughters are naughty and mischievous, I hope that you will not take offense." Lin Feng slightly smiled and shook his head, indicating that he wasn't offended. Zinan didn't seem to feel at ease. Could it be that Lin Feng's cultivation level is so high that he does not care about status and doesn't care about the words of normal people? Ziling and Ziyi just packed a few clothes and the necessities of travel. These people, when they saw her enter, started staring at her in an evil way. At that moment, Ziling and Lin Feng entered the room as well. They were, just like Ziyi, completely soaked. Besides, Lin Feng was wearing a silver mask to cover his face. Ziling was feeling cold and remained silent. When she saw the evil expression on the face of the three people, she felt a bit scared. Ziyi also noticed that these three people were staring at them. She coldly looked at them and even released some cold qi. These people were certainly not good people. But she remained vigilant. After all, they were not in the Ziwei village mountain anymore and had to be careful. She dragged Ziling to the other side of the hut and sat down. Lin Feng picked up some wood in the thatched hut and piled it up in front of Ziyi and Ziling. He immediately lit a fire. That would be a good way to get dry and warm. He was unceasingly putting wood in the fire to maintain it. These three people looked at Lin Feng, who was lowering his head taking care of the fire. He seemed like he hadn't even seen these three people. "So useless, I really don't understand what Daddy was thinking when he decided not to come and to let that piece of trash come with us," said Ziyi, thinking that Lin Feng could do nothing but simple chores. Instead of thanking him for tending the fire, she was just making fun of him while her eyes were filled with disdain. She had an unfavorable opinion of Lin Feng and it wasn't going to change, no matter what he did. Ultimately, she despised Lin Feng because she thought that Lin Feng was weak, but if she had known that Lin Feng was stronger than her own father, how would have she reacted? Ziyi didn't know that all the things she said didn't affect Lin Feng because Lin Feng did not put her in his eyes and did not care about her at all. He was, of course, not going to pay attention to her words. Of course, he also didn't have a favorable opinion of Ziyi. "Big brother, what do you think about these two girls?" said one of the three people while looking at Ziyi and Ziling. His evil smile resonated in the area. "I like the one who's acting coldly. Nice chest, nice bottom. She looks mature enough. It would be a real pleasure to sleep with her. I just don't know if she'll keep acting so cold while in bed." The man looked fascinating. He was staring at Ziyi, whose clothes were completely wet. Her clothes were so wet and sticking to her skin that her nipples were erect. That was, indeed, an alluring sight for this man. When Ziyi heard what the men were saying, her face turned even colder. She was staring at them and released a cold energy. "Big brother, that one doesn't seem to be any fun. I still prefer the small one. Not only is she cute but her figure is also not bad," said the one who hadn't talked yet. Lust was flashing in his eyes while staring at Ziling. These three people were loudly chatting as if they had no restraint. They were staring at Ziyi and Ziling like a starving man would look at food. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, nobody paid any attention to him. Ziling and Ziyi got closer to each other. Even though they were quite aggressive, in such a situation, they were still feeling a bit scared. "How shameless, try and speak that way again." Ziyi was releasing her chi. She stood up and looked at the three people. Nice figure, we can even see the shape of her breasts." The man who was being called Big Brother by the two others was staring at Ziyi's body as if he was looking at a naked woman. "Three evil alpacas, you really are extremely perverted, your reputation is well justified." At the moment when Ziyi was getting angry, a cold and detached voice interrupted them. Immediately, they saw a young man wearing golden clothes enter the thatched hut. "Three evil alpacas, you really are extremely perverted, your reputation is well justified." At the moment when Ziyi was getting angry, a cold and detached voice interrupted them. Immediately, they saw a young man wearing golden clothes enter the thatched hut. Even though it was raining heavily outside, that young man's clothes were magnificent and completely dry. He looked clean and handsome. He was holding a fan in his hand. He looked elegant and had just come from a luxurious carriage. The three evil alpacas, when Ziyi and Ziling heard that name, their facial expressions immediately changed. These three bastards surprisingly were the three evil alpacas. No wonder that they looked so evil. In the region surrounding the Golden Z Mountain, these three disgusting brothers were known for their extreme perversion. They were known for cruelly and violently molesting young girls. If Ziyi and Ziling had been their target, the outcome would have been unimaginable. "Who are you?" coldly asked the three evil alpacas while looking at that young man. "While Ziqiong's big ceremony is close, you go out and hunt young girls, right?" said the young man while raising his head and smiling coldly. He then moved towards Lin Feng's side, bent down and shook his fan above the fire grow fierce. "You are a man too, how come you are not helping these two girls when they are being humiliated?" coldly said the young man in golden clothes to Lin Feng while smiling. He sounded arrogant and conceited. Lin Feng raised his head and glanced at the young man. He was about as old as Lin Feng. He looked quite handsome. He seemed to come from a wealthy family. It was obvious at first glance that he was wealthy and considered everyone beneath his notice. The young man in golden clothes was smiling warmly but looked arrogant and had a mocking attitude. Lin Feng didn't reply to him. He continued feeding the fire. However, he didn't have a favorable opinion of that young man. If he wanted to be in the limelight, why did he need to go out of his way to humiliate Lin Feng? Why would you care about what the three of us are doing? If you don't want us to hurt you, it's best for you is to leave now, said the three evil alpacas coldly while staring at the young man. The young man didn't even look at them. They still felt a bit wary when seeing the young man disregard them. The young man in golden clothes glanced at them and a mocking smile appeared on his face. The three evil alpacas are vile, they are 30 years old and don't practice their cultivation. They just spend their time with young girls all day. She adored him already. Golden Rain Sword, the golden rain that fills the sky, you are Lin Haojie. The big brother of the three evil alpacas was astonished. He also looked slightly scared. Lin Haojie, also known as Golden Rain Lin Haojie. Surprisingly, it's him. Ziyi and Ziling were surprised when they heard that name. Lin Haojie was very famous in that region. Zi Qiong, of the Zi government, was his good friend. Even though he was young, he had already broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. Besides, because he was a sword master, he easily killed cultivators of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Outstanding young men like him were rare. You taught us a good lesson, I'm off. The big brother of the three evil alpacas was shaking and rushed towards the exit of the thatched hut. He was extremely quick. But Lin Haojie's sword was even faster. The sword rain fell down and the body of the big brother collapsed before it reached the exit. He was motionless on the floor. When Lin Haojie saw the body on the floor, a smile filled with satisfaction appeared on his face. He then put back his sword in its sheath with grace and elegance. Do you two beautiful girls plan to go to Golden Zi Mountain as well? Asked Lin Haojie while looking at Ziyi and Ziling with a warm and soft smile on his face. He was looking at them in a very seductive way. Yes, said Ziyi while nodding in a delicate way. Her voice was soft as well. Coming across each other today was fate. I am lucky to have met such beautiful girls today. However, it is now late and getting dark, the rain has stopped as well. I will not disturb you, have a good rest, said Lin Haojie while smiling. Immediately after, he turned around and left as elegantly and gracefully as he entered. But when he arrived at the door, he started walking slower and said, considering that two beautiful girls like you are staying overnight in here, don't let useless cowards near you as they might try something. While talking, Lin Haojie continued walking towards the exit. Immediately after, they heard his horse neigh, he had already left. As far as the useless coward was concerned, Lin Haojie obviously meant Lin Feng. When they saw him leave, Ziyi and Ziling looked like they were disappointed. Ziyi, sister, we haven't thanked him yet. Ziling suddenly sighed and Ziyi slightly shook her head while saying, do you think that Lin Haojie is that kind of person who expects something like a thanks? You're right, said Ziling while slightly nodding. He's a really outstanding young man. It's nothing like him, surprisingly he wears a mask because he doesn't dare let people see his fear, said Ziyi mockingly while glancing at Lin Feng. Lin Feng continued feeding the fire with wood and said in a cold tone, he's not as good as you two think. What gives you the right to speak about other people? If he hadn't been here, some bad things could have happened to us. You think that you could have escaped unharmed? I really don't understand why our father made you come with us. When Ziyi heard Lin Feng criticize Lin Haojie, she couldn't help but be disgusted. She already had a crush on Lin Haojie. Absolutely, Lin Feng, you should be thankful to Lin Haojie, said Ziling. Swords were also her specialty. I owe him nothing, he hasn't done anything for me. Besides, you owe him nothing either. He hasn't done anything which deserves gratitude, said Lin Feng as calm as always. As far as Lin Haojie is concerned, maybe what he had done looked great in the eyes of the two girls, but in Lin Feng's opinion, that young man was too arrogant. He attempted to humiliate Lin Feng and considered everyone else beneath his notice. Not only that, but he also thought he was better than everyone else. You're really hideous, Lin Haojie, and you have the same family name but you have nothing in common. Now, get out of the hut, said Ze while following what Lin Haojia said before he left the hut. If you want me to go, I don't care, but I would like to warn you that things are not always as they appear. I will prove that before I leave. Lin Feng stood up, looked at the big brother of the evil alpacas, who was lying on the floor, and said, "Hey you, how much longer are you going to play dead?" Ze and Ziling were astonished when they heard Lin Feng. Ze and Ziling were astonished when they heard Lin Feng. Lin Feng could talk to the dead. But a second later, the two girls were dumbstruck. They saw that the big brother, who was lying on the floor, suddenly moved and started crawling. He turned his head around and looked at Lin Feng in a cold and evil way. The evil alpaca's big brother hadn't died at all. He had just been injured, nothing more. A moment before, he hadn't released the slightest bit of qi and had been holding his breath, feigning death. That little boy is right. Lin Haojia is strong, but way too arrogant. He thinks that everything will go as he plans it. He didn't even notice that he hadn't killed me. His opinion of himself is way too high, said the big brother, sounding cold and detached. He agreed with Lin Feng. You are lucky that I was pretending to be dead, said the big brother, and then looked at Lin Feng while saying coldly, but, Lin Haojia has left now. You three are now my toys. You, the little boy, I'm not interested in you, but these two girls will accompany to console me after my brother's deaths. Ze and Ziling's expression changed. The big brother had broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. Even if he was injured, they still couldn't compete with him. Die boy, said the big brother while immediately attacking. He raised his fist and his fist bombarded the atmosphere, moving straight towards Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng slowly raised his hand, then rapidly pierced through the air like a meteor. When the glow from his strike disappeared, the big brother's forehead was covered with blood. He looked at Lin Feng, his eyes were filled with resentment before he died. Was Lin Feng really lucky that he was playing dead? You and Lin Haojia are equally as arrogant, said Lin Feng indifferently. While standing at the same place, he said slowly, if Lin Haojia hadn't stepped in, nothing would have happened to you girls anyway. Therefore, you don't owe him anything. Remember that, things are not always as they seem. It's exactly the same for him, he was pretending to be dead, but was actually waiting for his opportunity. When Lin Feng finished talking, he immediately started walking towards the exit of the thatched hut. In the blink of an eye, his silhouette disappeared like a ghost. When Ze and Ziling saw Lin Feng disappear, they were astonished. Lin Feng had just killed the big brother, he had proved that he could protect them. Even if Lin Haojia hadn't attacked, nothing would have happened to them. As far as what Lin Feng's last words, they were deep and profound. Things were not always as they seemed, just like Lin Haojia, who was showing a certain aspect of his personality, but in the end wasn't showing his true colors. The same was true for Lin Feng. The two girls despised him, thought that he was weak. But in the end, with a simple attack, he could kill a cultivator of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Ziyi's sister, Lin Feng seems extremely strong, whispered Ziling after remaining silent for a moment while staring at the corpses on the floor. He's just extremely arrogant. If he was as strong as he said, a moment ago, why did he wait for Lin Haojia to stop them? Why didn't he take the initiative? Besides, when Lin Haojia was here, Lin Feng didn't dare say a word against him. Lin Haojia is much stronger than him and Lin Feng was clearly afraid of him. His heart is just filled with jealousy, said Ziyi in a bad mood. She remembered Lin Haojia's softness and tenderness, her heart was still beating faster when thinking about that. Lin Feng certainly had nothing to do with Lin Haojia. But he just attacked once with his hand and killed a cultivator of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Besides, that resplendent glow looked like it came from a sword, said Ziling with lights unceasingly flashing in her eyes. She was making great efforts to try and remember Lin Feng's attack. It's only because the big brother was too negligent. The big brother was pretending to be dead in front of Lin Haojie but didn't care when in front of Lin Feng. It is obvious at a glance who is strong and who is weak. Besides, do you think that glow looked more majestic and more powerful than Lin Haojie's golden rain sword, said Zi, as stubborn as before. However, all her reasoning seemed to be flawed. Outside of the hut, a strong wind was blowing and penetrated into the hut. The fire that Lin Feng lit went out because of the strong wind. In a flash, the thatched hut became dark and cold. Zi and Ziling's hearts started pounding. Immediately after, they firmly grabbed each other's hands. They realized that there was cold sweat on the palms of both of their hands. Zi, sister, actually, if Lin Feng was here, it would be much better, said Ziling in a small voice. She had just realized that she had underestimated Lin Feng. Zi had criticized Lin Feng for having lit a fire and they both now realized that without it, it was very cold. Ziling, we can go up the mountain tonight, said Zi, surprising Ziling. Zi then continued, Lin Haojie is also going up now, isn't he? If we leave now, we may have a chance of catching up with him. What about Lin Feng? What, do you care about him? Said Zi coldly. Alright, let's go, said Ziling immediately after. The two girls left the hut and immediately jumped on their Qianli Shui horses. They immediately started galloping up the Golden Z mountain. A short time after they left the hut, Lin Feng appeared on a horse and followed them. On the top of the Golden Z mountain, there was a majestic palace, which was famous within that region. It was the location of the Z government. In the Z government, there was someone who had broken through to the Xianqi layer. In Mou and Shuiyu, people had the same opinion. A cultivator of the Xianqi layer could be defined as an extremely strong cultivator. Even members of the monarchy would consider them as cultivators worthy of respect. Cultivators of the Xianqi layer were rare. Outside of the Z government palace, there were two huge pillars which had a huge wooden board across with an inscription. The two words, Z government, was engraved in huge letters on this wooden board. At that moment, Zi and Ziling were approaching these two huge pillars. Lin Feng was calmly following them. The three of them were galloping at full speed on the mountain road, but it was pitch black outside. They had needed 2 hours to climb the mountain. We are from the Z-Way mountain, here are our invitation cards, said Zi while taking out invitation cards and handing them over to the guards. The guards opened the cards and saw that they were from Z-Way village. They then nodded and let them pass. The three of them entered the vast and immense palace. It was so huge that they didn't know where to go. Zi and Ziling, even though they were blood related to the people of the Z government, had never gone there before. It was their first time. Being blood related to the Z government was nothing special. The really strong and powerful family members were all disciples of the main clan. Besides, even though people were passing them, Zi and Ziling knew nobody. Besides, as it was still late at night, they didn't have a place to rest and had no choice but to aimlessly wander around the palace. Master Lin, please come this way. At that moment, in the distance, two silhouetted were speaking as they walked through the palace. Zi and Ziling raised their heads and looked in that direction. The person who had just been called Master Lin was Lin Haojie. Master Lin, shouted Zi while looking at him. Her voice was filled with joy and surprise. Lin Haojie looked in their direction and immediately saw Zi and Ziling. A tender and soft smile appeared on his handsome and delicate face. He walked over to them and said, "It seems like I, Lin Haojie, am very lucky to meet you girls again." "Master Lin, my name is Zi," said Zi while pretending to be shy. "Master Lin, is that your friend?" When the girl who was leading Lin Haojie saw that he knew Zi, she couldn't help but ask. "Yes, she is," replied Lin Haojie while nodding. "So that's how it is, Miss Zi, may I ask you where you are staying?" asked the girl, when she heard that she was Lin Haojie's friend. She remained polite as she was one of the maids of the palace. Lin Haojia was Zi Qiong's good friend and Zi Qiong was the heir to the Zi government. Besides, Lin Haojia was also very strong and came from a wealthy family. Since he knew the people from the Zi government, he was respected by the servants. Where? Zi felt awkward. She saw that Zi Ling was getting angry and said, "We are related to the Zi government, we are from the Zi Wei mountain village. We have come to pay our respects to Zi Qiong. We don't know where exactly we're going to stay yet." "Zi Wei mountain village," whispered the maid. Immediately after, she smiled as if she understood. She said, "Since you are friends of Lin Haojia, I will help you with your accommodation issue." If they had just come to pay respects to Zi Qiong, the maid wouldn't have helped them find accommodation. The three of them had arrived so late in the night. Whether they were blood-related to the Zi government or not didn't matter. Besides, she had also ignored the fact that they were from the Zi Wei mountain village. That didn't give them a high status. Them being friends with Lin Haojia was much more important than them being from the Zi Wei mountain village, it granted them a much higher status. She also had to give Lin Haojia face and help his friends. No need. Tomorrow is the big wedding ceremony, which we will both be attending. There is space in my room. I would have nothing against letting two beautiful girls sleep in my room tonight, said Lin Haojia with a big smile on his face. He, once again, ignored Lin Feng. It is not very convenient, said Zi in a soft voice. She didn't sound like she was refusing, it sounded more like she wanted to accept his offer. Lin Haojia was surprised. When he saw that she was acting shy, a smile appeared on his face. It is not very convenient, said Zi in a soft voice. She didn't sound like she was refusing, it sounded more like she wanted to accept his offer. Lin Haojia was surprised. When he saw that she was acting shy, a smile appeared on his face. If Miss Ce doesn't like it or has doubts in regard to my personality, I can also give you the entire mansion and I will spend the night outside. That is absolutely no problem, said Mo Haojia sounding righteous and awe-inspiring. No, of course not, what you proposed is perfect, hastily replied Zi. Zi Ling and Lin Feng were stupefied. But Lin Haojia immediately smiled and said, so I understand that you're accepting my offer. If it is too inconvenient for you, please tell me, said Zi while lowering her head in a shy fashion. What are you talking about? It is a great pleasure for me, said Lin Haojia while smiling. Zi, sister, how could accept to spend the night in a stranger's room, said Zi Ling in a low voice while firmly shaking her sister's hand. Zi Ling, young men like Master Lin are rare. Do you think that he is not trustworthy? Let's go together, said Zi. Ignorant, said a cold and detached voice. It came from Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng was looking at Lin Haojia. He said in a cold and detached way, at the foot of the mountain, you said that they shouldn't let me stay in the thatched hut because I might try something and now you're inviting them to go to your place. Don't you think that you might try something? Isn't that what outstanding and handsome young men of high status do? Lin Haojia was stupefied. He coldly looked at Lin Feng. Immediately after, he smiled and said, could it be that you think that you could be compared with the likes of me? Ridiculous, said Lin Feng. As if having a high social status could give you the right to mislead young girls. Humph. Lin Haojia groaned coldly. He looked at Zi and said, Miss Ce, since that is the case, you can forget my offer, goodbye. When he finished talking, Lin Haojia started to leave. Master Lin, wait, shouted Zi while running after him. She said, I obviously don't agree with him. Zi turned her head around and coldly looked at Lin Feng. She then immediately said to Zi Ling, sister, let's go together. I'm not going, said Zi Ling while shaking her head. All right. Then be careful that he does not try anything, replied Zi while looking at Lin Feng and then ran after Lin Haojia. Lin Feng looked at Ziyi's disappearing silhouette. He was exasperated. He had warned her over and over again, but since Ziyi was stubborn, Lin Feng had no other solution. He was also done with the task which Si Nan had given. He promised to make sure the girls would be safe until they reached the Z governmental palace. "Why are you not going with her?" asked Lin Feng. "Maybe you are right. Things are not always as they appear to be." Even though Lin Haojia is handsome, extraordinary, and very strong, he might be very hypocritical, said Ziling in a low voice while pouting and gazing into the distance. "Well then, are you not going to listen to your sister's words and be careful of me?" asked Lin Feng while slightly laughing. Lin Haojia was, indeed, very hypocritical. Ziling turned her head and looked at Lin Feng. She chuckled and said, "But if you meant us harm, you had an opportunity down there in the thatched hut, why would you wait for us to arrive at the Z government palace?" Lin Feng was surprised by her pure smile. The corner of her mouth had curved into a gentle smile. Things were not always as they appeared, especially when it came to her. She had a cold and standoffish personality which actually hid a soft and innocent heart. Her smile was quite marvelous to behold. Even though it was a simple invitation, Ziyi was really too innocent and naive, she didn't understand that it was a trap. "But don't misunderstand me, even though you are not that weak, I, Ziling, will only marry with an extremely strong sword cultivator. I will never be interested in someone like you," said Ziling while laughing. Immediately after, she started walking away to find a place to rest. "Sword cultivator," thought Lin Feng. He smiled and shook his head. He then followed her. In another part of the palace, in a manor, someone was knocking at a door. "Come in," said Ziyi from inside the room. Immediately after, the door of the room opened and Lin Haojia was in the doorway. "Miss Ziyi, can I come in?" said Lin Haojia while waiting outside of the room. "Of course you can. Please come in, Master Lin," replied Ziyi. Lin Haojia was firmly staring at Ziyi. He noticed that her clothes hadn't dried off. He could see her delicate young body through her clothes, which gave birth to flames of desire in his heart. "Ziyi, you're really beautiful," said Lin Haojia softly. Ziyi slightly lowered her head, remaining silent for a second out of shyness. Then, her lips moved. "I'm not." You are beautiful from head to toe," said Lin Haojia in a soft voice and then continued, "Ziyi, since the first time when we met in the thatched hut, I feel my head gets light whenever I see you, I feel like we are perfect for each other. I wouldn't have thought that we would meet again so quickly." Ziyi remained silent and lowered her head. Her face slightly turned red. "Ziyi, why are you not talking? If you think that I am playing some game, I can leave now," said Lin Haojia. Ziyi immediately raised her head and didn't stop shaking her head. At that moment, Lin Haojia had already arrived at her side. They were now very close. Ziyi. Lin Haojia's voice was filled with softness and tenderness. Ziyi's face was becoming redder and redder. She was looking at Lin Haojia, her eyes revealed that she had some feelings for him. She hadn't thought that everything would happen so quickly, but Lin Haojia was her perfect husband, he was outstanding, had a high social status and had high natural talent. Men like him were rare. He was interested in Ziyi, an adopted girl from the Ziwei mountain. With his high status, it was obviously a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her. Besides, she had feelings for him, so she couldn't just reject him, even if they hadn't known each other for a long time. "Would you like to become my wife in the future? I want to keep you by my side forever," said Lin Haojia in a soft and tender voice while getting even closer to her. Ziyi's heart was pounding, her face was red, but she was happy, it was so sudden though. "Yes," said Ziyi while slightly nodding. Immediately after, she just felt two big hands embrace her. While hugging her, Lin Haojia became even more enthusiastic, he immediately started kissing her. Ze was shaking, she had the sensation that she had been struck by a lightning. She could feel Lin Haojie's warmth. Immediately after, she also put her hands around him and kissed him back. Lin Haojie then started touching her body. A short time after, he started caressing her young body, which was soft and warm. Ze started feeling restless and let out a small moan. The two of them threw themselves onto the bed. They threw their clothes to the side. After a short time, they were moaning from pain, pleasure, and heat. Their bodies were in fusion in the middle of that room. In the sky, the sun had started to rise, the Z government was starting to get lively. On that day, Zi Qiong's wedding ceremony was going to happen. There were two silhouettes sitting on the edge of a cliff watching the sunrise. They were sitting on the overhanging cliff with their legs above the precipice. They were gazing into the distance and looking at the sunrise. It looked particularly beautiful. "How beautiful," said Ziling, amazed at such a wonderful scenery. It was a glowing red above the sea of clouds. "It's very beautiful indeed," replied Lin Feng. In his previous life, it was one of Lin Feng's dreams to watch the sunrise from the top of a mountain. At that moment, that dream had come true. He finally knew what it felt like to appreciate such natural beauty. Besides, as he was able to use earth fusion, his perception was much stronger than that of Ziling. It was as if the beauty of watching that sunrise was enhanced. "I would have never thought that the first time I would watch the sunrise would be with you on my side. Too bad that you are not the kind of man that I am looking for," said Ziling while laughing. She immediately stood up and said, "Let's go back." Daddy said that Zi Qiong's future spouse is the most beautiful in the region. Today, I want to see if the rumors are true. Lin Feng stood up as well with a strange expression on his face. He wanted to see the bride, but not because he wanted to see if she was beautiful or not, but because he wanted to see if it was Duan Xinyi. If it was really Duan Xinyi, how could she get married to Zi Qiong? What if the rumors were true though? If that was the case, what would Lin Feng do? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.